September 12th, 2022, meeting the Acton Select Board. Please note that under 940 CMR 29.105, Imogen Nagaretti will be participating remotely during the meeting due to a geographic distance greater than 20 miles via video conference. Please note that a quorum is physically present. A roll call vote is required for any and all votes involving members participating remotely. We'll start this evening, as we usually do, with residents' concerns to discuss any matters that are not on the agenda. Yes, sir.
Jim Wood for Redwood Road. When I spoke at the August 22nd meeting of the Select Board, I was mindful of the guidance of the town moderator given at every town meeting. One may criticize policies and positions, but not persons. Comments, not character. I believed I observed that protocol throughout my remarks. I named no names. I criticized comments, not character. Mine was no ad hominem attack, but sadly it was treated as such and responded to as if it were. I truly believe that every member of the Select Board is sincere and well-meaning. They deserve our respect and gratitude for their sacrifice of time and talent serving the citizens of Acton. However, if some of those citizens disagree with statements made by a member of the Select Board, or disagree with policies or positions espoused by Select Board members, they have every right to question and criticize those statements, positions, and policies without being publicly scolded. For the record, please note that I did not call a member of the board naive or foolhardy, as I was accused of doing by two members of the board. I quite clearly said, and the tape shows it, that the comments were at best naive and at worst foolhardy. There's a difference. I proceeded to state why I held that opinion. In this time of heightened threats to election officials and recent events of actual violence in Acton, it seemed unwise and untimely to move the police further away from a polling place. Indeed, Massachusetts law requires the presence of an officer or constable inside the polling place to ensure the security of the ballot box and the election officials. In the response of three members of the board, no one addressed my actual criticisms. They only scolded me for attacking a member of the board. Constraint of time did not allow me to make the further observation that in all likelihood there will be no, quote, recent immigrants at the polling place, since it takes at least 5 years for the naturalization process. By definition, the voters at polling places are either native-born citizens or women and men who have commendably chosen to become citizens. No member of the Select Board is or should be above criticism. You deserve our respect, but not our unswerving acquiescence. If members of the board choose to launch ad hominem attacks, that's their prerogative. My skin is quite thick enough to survive it. But I respectfully suggest that in so doing, they are discouraging citizens of Acton from making remarks, criticizing statements or actions of the board. That's not healthy and will diminish the free flow of comments that I thought was the very purpose of citizens' concerns. I was pleased to note that at the recent primary election on Tuesday last, there was the usual complement of police officers at the entrance of the polling place and inside. I trust that will be the case for the general election in November. Thank you.
Thank you.
Leo Fochman, Wright Terrace. I want to start by saying that I agree with Mr. Wood's statement. I believe that every member of the Select Board is sincere and well-meaning. They deserve our respect and gratitude for their sacrifice of time and talent serving the citizens of Acton. Now, I'd like to share a quick personal story that happened over 10 years ago. I heard that my grandmother was being treated unfairly. I sent an email to my cousin telling him what I had heard and that she is being treated unfairly. When I read his response, he sent me an email, I immediately focused on the word that I was being told, that I was ignorant. I called him angrily and told him that I didn't appreciate being called ignorant. He asked me to open the email and reread the section. When I did, his words said that I was ignorant of the issue with our grandmother. I apologized to him for my angry response. I believe this is similar to how Mr. Wood's statement was taken. Mr. Snyder Grant later said that Mr. Wood called one of his fellow board members naive and foolhardy. Like my interaction with my cousin, he focused only on the part of the statement, not the actual statement. Mr. Wood quite clearly said that the comments were at best naive, at worst foolhardy. He was referring to the comments, not the select board member. I urge everyone to watch the select board meeting if you have not already, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Up to this time, no name was linked to the select board member. I believe Mr. Wood was very respectful. He referenced Massachusetts law to back up why he believed the comments were naive. Let me remind you that the definition of naive is having or showing a lack of experience, judgment, or information. Here, the information about Mass law was missing. As far as the people feeling unsafe having a police presence at the polling stations, can we find a way to communicate with these people to find out why they feel unsafe and to help resolve that issue? Personally, I have a high regard for the police force. There are many positive stories I can share about the police. I'd like to share one now. I was so impressed with one police officer during voting in March of 2020 that I sent an email to Chief Burrows and CC'd our town manager, Mr. Mangiarotti. This is what I wrote. Chief Burrows, I want to commend one of your officers for their service last night at R.J. Gray Junior High School. I should have asked for his name, but I didn't. I arrived at R.J. Gray at about 6:45. There was a long line with people waiting to vote. It started raining. The officer did everything he could to manage the crowd and get as many people out of the rain as possible. He did a superb job with crowd management in a friendly and professional manner. Our police officers are helpful. We need to find a way to share the many positive things or positive ways our town employees, including police, fire department, boards, and committees, have helped make our town a wonderful place to live. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Alyssa Nickel, 76 School Street. I just wanted to draw everyone's, on the board's attention to the increased frequency of these, the license expiring on DocuShare. I attribute it to the increase in resident activism and access to knowledge about how to get information and be involved, probably because the pandemic brought us remote meetings and lots more people tuned in. So it only happened very infrequently in previous years, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and I've just noticed an uptick, and it's very frustrating. It happens on the weekends, and so I'm assuming that staff are not, they shouldn't be, all on DocuShare. So that's kind of confusing. If it only happened once on the weekends, I would attribute it to IT work. But just an hour and a half ago, I tried to get on to print something to bring to this meeting, and the license had exceeded the user. So I hope that we can increase that. I know that probably costs more, but I think it would be really helpful to serve all of the residents who are trying to access information online. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Michael Schultz from Brucewood Road. I don't come to too many town meetings. I'm sorry about that.
I don't know if I'm just here to make comments or if I can ask questions. Can you let me know what I can do?
Well, the purpose for this time is people are given about 3 minutes to make any comments that they wish to the Select Board and the public. Generally, we don't respond to those comments because it's not something that's on the agenda, but certainly if you have some thoughts you'd like to share with us, we welcome them.
Great. Okay, I was asking questions for clarification, but I'll just speak quickly and I'll be done. It's my understanding, but I'm not sure, that if I try to speak about the 100 Discovery Way proposal today, I'll be asked to stop talking and sit down. Is that correct? That's what I've heard from neighbors.
So we will be dealing with that very shortly, that particular issue. And that hearing is going to be continued until October 3rd. It is an item that's on the agenda right now, so we normally would not accept any comments, even if we were going to hold the hearing right now.
I get it.
But I would suggest October 3rd.
Okay. And when was that decision made? I noticed on the agenda that the date is crossed off. When did that happen officially?
Well,
I only heard about it today, so.
I'm a little unclear on the exact timing. I know that there was an issue. The applicant had asked for a continuance, and I believe initially it was continued until a meeting that we had scheduled for the 26th, which interfered with Rosh Hashanah. So a notice went out, and then we realized that it's a religious holiday, so we actually postponed that entire Select Board meeting until October 3rd. The timing occurred very late last week.
When was it announced, though? I'm sorry. When was that officially announced? I know Kristen had a couple conversations over the phone, but when did the official notification go out?
I'll defer to the manager on that.
So we advertised public hearings to our website, and a revised notice went out, I believe Friday, midday, and then again today when it was amended.
Friday.
So.
It was amended today. So was the vote cast already to continue the hearing, or are you going to vote on that at this meeting?
We'll be holding that vote. It was supposed to be at 7:10.
Okay. Well, will residents be allowed to comment on the vote without actually discussing the proposal?
I'll allow some brief comments, but we don't want to have the applicant is not here to be able to respond to those comments. Mm-hmm. And, it would really be sort of a premature situation to go into great detail on it. If you've got a very brief comment to make at that point, certainly we would entertain that. But
I have a very brief comment, and I won't bring up the proposal, but it is my opinion that we should not approve the continuance. I know it's almost always approved, but in this case, it's my opinion, given the issues, I'll say, involved, that the town and the townspeople need much more time than a month to wrap their heads around this whole thing. And I would suggest that any move forward on any facility of this type that poses any kind of danger be part of the town plan and not something that's subject to ad hoc, willy-nilly rejection or approval based on no plan at all. That's my only comment for today.
thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bill Cloward, Piper Road. I'm here tonight to ask a little bit about the proposed bids that you're asking for the properties down on School Street. The reason I'm doing this is because I was here many years ago when we developed this piece of land as a parking lot for the use for the commuter trains, and I guess it's no longer being used for that reason. But I also realize that it still is being used by different groups such as the Ironwork Farm, any thing that happens at Exchange Hall. I see people there at times waiting for their spouses to arrive off the train so they don't have to go up into the heavy traffic of School Street and Main Street, and I just think that maybe there's a little bit more than redeveloping this property to create a little more congestion in the area. I just hope that before you go too far on this, that you think it out, have a look at what's going on down there and realize that it does serve a purpose for the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Amber Clower, 70 Piper Road. About 2 weeks ago, my husband and I were at Piper Road intersection getting ready to cross over to Taylor Road. And I always hesitate when the light goes green, and thank God I did. Someone ran the red light, hit a car, the car went airborne, knocked over a light pole, and it was total chaos. Now, we were calling on cell phones and everything. Meanwhile, the lights were in ventricular fibrillation and cars were still coming. It was total chaos. And it takes a long time when you call on a cell phone and try to get help. So Billy and I would like to recommend having what do you call it, Billy? Medical call boxes, maybe one on each side, on Piper's side, on Taylor's side, so it can be activated right away, because this is a very dangerous intersection. And I don't think this needs to have a massive months of studying. Look at the police records. There are a lot of accidents here. And one of the people was transferred to three-person transfer to Leahy and very seriously injured. So please think, it could be you or myself or any of us. We really have to be very, very careful here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, might want to discuss that with the fire chief. Thank you.
I'm Ping Liu, live at 8 Monument Place in North Acton. So I would, propose, the board vote against the proposal. I have two concerns. So if you check the neighbor towns, Acton has the most popular, most population among all the towns. So if you compare, Westford, we have the same number of residents, but their size is 60% higher than Acton. So if you compare Carlisle and Concord, their area combined 2x of Acton, but Acton, their combined population is Acton population. You compare Stowe is 20% of our population, but 80% of our size. You check Boxborough basically 80% of our size, but this is 20-something% of our population. If you check, Littleton is basically 90% of the size of our size, but they only have 40% of the population. So basically, the concern is, is environmental. So if that's a battery leak, that would damage our water supply. From the population-wise, Acton has the most density in population with small area. And Acton residents depend on the well water, for our life. So that will damage, if that's, so basically that's the concern concern most. Another thing is,
excuse me,
if that's a fire. So basically, it will damage the neighborhood, the forest and the neighborhood. Yeah.
Excuse me, if this is regarding Discovery Way, the public hearing hasn't been open.
Yes, that's the thing.
So
for battery, yes.
So your comments wouldn't be entered into the public record until the public hearing is open. So
yeah,
I would hold off until the public hearing is opened.
Oh, it's not. So there are comments.
So we'll.
But the neighbors have comments.
So
I don't live in a neighborhood. I have far away. but I concern the Acton life.
So we appreciate your comments.
Yeah.
But I think the more appropriate venue is when we continue the hearing, which hopefully we'll do shortly. We'll continue the hearing until October 3rd, and I think
Okay.
I expect this room will be even more full than it is today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I don't know why it can't just be left on, by the way. I'm Cheryl Kennedy Perez. I live on Harris Street, 33 Harris Street, in apartment 15. And I just I just want to keep bringing to your attention the needs of renters. There are current situations where there is a substantial amount of intimidation happening around people renting apartments and even asking for standard maintenance. There are people are afraid to speak up and to advocate for themselves in any way because, I mean, after all, housing is kind of the essence of what we do. And this I know I've been here before and talked about the conditions in the buildings. That's all still true. The issue now is it's actually getting worse. And it's getting worse because things don't get fixed and people are intimidated to not ask for maintenance. And I know, we as tenants are trying to sort all of this out, but to have some support from the town would just be a godsend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Stella Coe, 11 Guswood Road. I hate doing this. I just have two things. I appreciate the comments that the two gentlemen made in the beginning. I wish that they had acknowledged that even if their words did not have the intent that they thought, that they could recognize that that's not what was heard and that it was still hurtful. And I very much appreciate the select board members who did speak up that day. And then my second comment is I wanted to support the Housing and Climate Justice for Acton group who are asking for support. And I think somebody else will talk about their proposal, but I wanted to support their proposal for, following the Malden Office of Housing Stability model for supporting our renting neighbors in our town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Martin Benson, 21 Deacon Hunt Drive. On April 20th, 2022, I submitted a records request seeking specific emails of the town manager and select board member David Martin. Under the public records law, the town was legally obligated to provide a response to my records request within 10 business days. In their response, the town was required to identify what items were in their possession, which items the town intended to produce, and which items the town intended to withhold, including the citation of the specific legal exemption for each and every item being withheld. First, the town refused to issue a response after the 10-day business deadline had passed. Therefore, I filed an appeal with the Public Records Division of the Secretary of State's office. On May 26, 2022, in case SPR 221137, the Secretary of State found, quote, that the town did not satisfy its burden in responding to Mr. Benson's records request, end quote. Subsequently, the town was ordered to provide me with a response consistent with the Secretary's order and the public records law within 10 business days. Secondly, on June 15th, the town employee transmitted the records pertaining to my request via a series of emails. However, not included in this chain of emails was the response to my records request, which the town was ordered by the Secretary of State's office to provide. Thus, the town failed to include which records it was withholding. On June 20th, I wrote the town inquiring whether they intended to issue a response which was compliant with the law. On June 27th, the town employee responded saying, quote, the town of Acton's production of records pursuant to your request included all documents in the town's possessions that are responsive to your request and not otherwise privileged or exempt from disclosure under the law. If you're not satisfied with this response, you have the right to appeal and seek redress through the Supervisor of Public Records or by filing an appeal in Middlesex Superior Court, end quote. Following the town's advice, I again appealed to the Secretary of State's office. On July 20th, 2022, in case SPR 221534, the Secretary of State's office again ordered the town to provide me with a response compliant to both the Public Records Law and its regulations within 10 business days. However, after 17 business days passed without a response from the town, I emailed the town manager and town clerk to inquire whether they intended to comply with the order. The email went unanswered, so on August 31st, I forwarded the email to town council and inquired from her whether the town intended to comply with the order. Unsurprisingly, this email has gone unanswered. By refusing to identify which records are being withheld and under what legal exemption, the town of Acton appears to deliberately avoiding the legal requirement of identifying which records pertaining to my records request are in their possession, custody, and control. Emails gleaned from the records request illustrate the town has a history of implementing the tactic of withholding public records without notifying the requester of the record's existence or the legal reason, if any, for the record being withheld. Some of these records also seem to have been improperly withheld. It now appears the town manager, just like the superintendent of the school systems, believes that he too is above the law. I have two questions for the town manager. Mr. Mangiarotti, are you aware that it is a crime in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to withhold a public records? And two, right now or during your town manager update and on the public record, will you provide me a response, or will you agree to provide me with a response to my records request of April 20th, which is compliant to both the Public Records Law and the multiple orders issued by the Secretary of State within 10 business days? Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else who wishes to make any citizen?
Daniel Gilfix, 21 Vanderbilt Road. I'm here to talk a little bit about the renters advocate. People have been discussing pros and cons. I can see there's a little bit of a conflict of interest, perhaps to hire somebody who would advocate for people who are not paying real estate taxes. On the other hand, I can see a bona fide need to somehow have the voices heard of the renters who are getting exploited by their landlords. Have we considered some sort of volunteer committee, a binding committee that wouldn't require us to spew out more taxpayers' money to hire somebody with this type of conflict of interest? Some sort of board that would include representatives from different organizations within the town where renters could go and express their grievances. There would still be a place to go, but we wouldn't necessarily have to hire somebody to do it. And we could honor their decisions the same way we honor your decisions and all the other committees. Thank you.
Thank you.
Linda Vieira, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me? Hello? Yeah, my name is Linda Vieira, 441 Cleveland Road, and I would have liked to have been in person so I could have spoken earlier, but I'm home with COVID. I would like to thank the Select Board for allowing residents to express their concerns during this time, whether it be to support or disagree with an action or decision the Select Board has made, or to share their thoughts about an issue not on the agenda. I don't want to rehash what was said at the August 22nd meeting, except to point out that all three comments that were quoted were made by one Select Board member. These comments were aimed at one Select Board member and not at a decision the Select Board made. We all have different opinions and viewpoints, and being free to express those is one of the pillars of our democracy. However, everybody is capable of voicing their disagreement without resorting to hurtful and disdainful language that is aimed at individuals' comments or viewpoints. In addition, I would like to ask that everyone who lives in Acton be open to the possibility that your experience living here may not be the same as your neighbors. In fact, with a diverse population of over 24,000 people, it is a given that someone who just moved here will see things differently than someone who has lived here 40 years. But no matter how long you have lived here, each resident's viewpoint and opinion is equally valid and valued. Lastly, I would like to thank board members who spoke out when a resident called a select board member hurtful names. I hope this does not happen at this meeting or at future meetings, but if it does, I respectfully ask the chair to call for civility and respect when a resident starts to refer to anyone, be it their comment or their opinion, with disdainful names. Thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara Lang, go ahead.
Mute. Okay. I've moved to Acton in January, and I'm trying to figure out how to participate in these Zoom meetings. I attended in-person meetings when I lived in Boxborough, but I've just moved here in January, and I'm trying to figure out how to do this. I live at Magog Woods, and I understand there's going to be a new owner of a mall next door, and I wanted to find out whatever I could about that for information, and that's why I'm participating. I also volunteer at Household Goods and with English at Large as a tutor of English language. So I will be volunteering in town, and I want to try to figure out how to do all of that. So I just wanted to introduce myself and try to figure out how to participate, and that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no one else.
Thank you. Your comment. Considering the time, I'd like to get these two public hearings out of the way, and then we'll go to town manager and member updates. So, I'll read the notice for 100 Discovery Way. The Acton Select Board will hold a public hearing on September 12th, 2022 at 7:10 p.m. in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room, room 204, at the Town Hall, 472 Main Street, Acton, and virtually at actonma.gov/meeting/BOS on the application of BWC Colesbrook LLC for a site plan special permit under zoning bylaw section 10.4 at 100 Discovery Way for an energy storage facility. Application materials and how to participate remotely are available online at Acton and at Acton Town Hall. doc.actonma.gov/view/collection-15376. I'll note here that the petitioner has requested a revised extension until October 3rd, 2022 at 7:10 p.m. I would like to do is open the hearing, and then I will entertain a motion for a continuance. So, hearing is opened. Any member of the board care to call for a continuance?
Oh, sure. I'll make that motion.
And could I have a second?
Second, but I think we need to be specific that they were offering a continuance to October 3rd, 2022 at 7:10 p.m.
Yes.
As part of the motion.
I'd will be 7:10 PM in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room, 204, Town Hall, 472 Main Street, Acton, and virtual via Zoom.
Yes, that's exactly what I intended to say in my motion. Thank you.
Thank you. So, moved and seconded to approve a continuance. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Could we possibly have comments on the motion before we have a vote? Thank you. I'm really glad we're having an extension. The more I read the application, the more questions I had. And I guess the only, the sort of meta question I have is what's helpful to do with questions now, over the next, between now and October 3rd? Should I send them to the manager's office or to David Martin, who's the selectman assigned, or to who? I mean, I'm happy to wait till the hearing to actually get answers, but I'd love to get the questions out there.
If you want to send any questions that any member has that to help us prepare for the public hearing, you can send them to me. Thanks.
Or you can send it to me, or both.
Okay, any other questions? Board. All right, we have a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded to continue this hearing until 7:10 PM on October 3rd in this room. The clerk, please call the roll.
Sure. Jim?
Aye.
Thank you, Dean.
Aye.
Thanks, Fran.
Aye.
Thank you, David.
Aye.
Awesome. And I also say aye, so that's unanimous.
Thank you. So I'm signing it now. This has been continued officially until October 3rd, 2022 at 7:10 PM in this room. Thank you. All right, moving along. We have a Class 2 auto dealership license. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Section 58, the Acton Select Board will hold a public hearing on September 12th, 2022 at 7:20 PM in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room, 204, and by video conference and call-in for a Class 2 auto dealer's license for the Fifth Element LLC, located 448 Great Road, Acton. Login instructions for computers can be found here. Computer, please click on the link to join the public meeting, actonmass.gov/meeting/BOS, or from telephone, dial 646-876-9923 and enter webinar ID number 503-918-785. Telephone users may dial *9 to request to speak after joining the meeting. Computer and app users may use the raise hand feature to request to speak. So is the applicant present? You are.
Yes, we are.
Please explain your application to us.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Ravil Abdelkadirov, and we are planning to run our Fifth Element LLC, car dealership. And we are here to get a Class 2 license approval, Yeah.
Thank you. We have any,
Thank you.
Any questions from members of the board? David.
Hi. A couple of questions. What's on this site now? I was going to take I didn't get to take a drive down Great Road. I looked on the maps and I was unsure what was at this site now.
At the site now, there is almost, there was run a closing store. Yeah. Now we're...
Ask him.
I know the answer.
Yeah.
It's on the old Buttons and Bows
store.
Okay,
front.
thank you.
Yeah.
And how many cars will you be storing on the site?
Right now, we're planning about 10 cars. We're going to start slow based on the market. And we're going to expand to 20 cars in the upcoming year.
Okay, and you're not fixing any cars on site or
No, we're not.
preparing them or anything?
Yes, we are not repairing the cars on the site now.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Any questions from other members of the board? Jim?
Will you need to be making changes to the building to make it fit your business?
No, there is no any plans to change into the building. We're going to start as it is.
Okay, and just a question of curiosity. See, when I heard Fifth Element, I'm thinking, awesome movie. And I'm wondering where Fifth Element, what that means to you.
Oh, so that means, so the fifth element in a chemical table is a bore, so which is an atom, which is an energy.
Mm-hmm.
So our business is energized business. We are energized guys. So we're starting. This is our first business.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions from members of the public? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to close the public hearing.
I get a second?
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded to close the public hearing. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Jim?
Aye.
Thank you, Dean.
Aye.
Thanks, Fran.
Aye.
Thank you, David.
Aye.
Thank you. I also say aye. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Hearing has been closed. I'll entertain another motion.
Do you have a nice convenient motion written out there, Dean? Because I would love to say a motion, but I want to make sure I say the right words. Okay.
Here's the hearing
So,
notice right
oh, look at that. Yes, so I'd like to make a motion that we approve a Class 2 auto dealership license for the Fifth Element LLC operating at 448 Great Road.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I get a second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Final comments? No? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Jim?
Aye.
Thank you, Dean.
Aye.
Thanks, Fran.
Aye.
Thank you, David.
Aye.
Awesome. I also say aye. That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right. We return to our schedule. Mr. Manager, your update, please.
Thank you. I have a few things to go through. Just first of all, I wanted to thank Julie Pierce and members of the staff and community and volunteers who put together quite a block party on Saturday afternoon in Kelly's Corner to celebrate the businesses that are there, the community that surrounds it, and the exciting infrastructure project that is going to be starting this fall, early winter. Great event. Hundreds, I'd say close to 1,000 people went through there in a day, but I didn't count. But it was certainly well attended from my perspective and a lot of fun. So thank you to everyone who put a lot of work into that. I want to announce that the finance department and all those folks involved in the financial reporting that we do as an organization has been recognized for the 8th year in a row for excellence in financial reporting from the Government Finance Officers Association, which is it's a great honor. Steve Barrett is actually at the back of the room. Our finance director and the members of his team work very hard to prepare the comprehensive annual financial report, which I hope you all read. It's very interesting. Really big news from the state. There was a ceremony in Somerset earlier this week where the Baker-Polito administration announced that they were going to be granting the town of Acton $1 million for the River Street Dam Removal Project, which is really exciting support that we are getting from our partners at the state. There's been a lot of local investment and town meeting supported work there, and we have a design that's in really good shape. So on River Street, hopefully starting in less than a year from now, will be the removal of the dam using state grant funds, and then creation of a historic park to help recognize the industrial history of South Acton, and it'll be a really great project. So we look forward to getting starting on that this spring. Town offices will be closed Friday for Professional Development Day, so if you need to see someone to interact with a town employee, try to do it on Thursday or Monday, or before then. Friday we'll be doing a lot of things as an organization together. It's an important part of what we do every year to maintain a strong employee morale and keep everybody growing. On Thursday this week in this room, starting at 7 o'clock, there will be a Complete Streets open house to talk about Great Road. There's been a lot of questions and concerns about Great Road from a pedestrian safety standpoint. We've received a grant from the state, a $90,000 grant to do a big study of ways we can improve pedestrian and vehicle and bike safety along that road. Thursday night, we'll have the plans. We'll roll them out on these tables here, and there'll be a brief presentation, and people can come and talk to the design team and give your feedback on things you think make sense and things that you think don't make sense. And hopefully we'll move forward with design to make infrastructure improvements along that corridor in the near future. 7 p.m. Thursday in this room. The state announced earlier this month that they would be distributing to each community thousands and thousands of COVID tests. So we have those, or we'll be getting those. We'll be giving many of those to the school district, and we'll be distributing them as we have been throughout our town offices. So if you need those, reach out to us, and we can help you with that. We just, this last week, logged our 5,000th call for the town services hotline. That started in the beginning of the pandemic, and we've maintained that service going forward, and it's providing a lot of great opportunities for staff to contribute to the organization as a whole, and giving a person for people to talk to when they call town hall or other offices. On September 27th, which is a Tuesday afternoon at 4 o'clock to 6 p.m., there will be an open house at 30 Sudbury, which is our Human Services and Senior Center facility. We moved in that building 5 years ago, September, and this is an open house to celebrate that milestone. We'll have all the people that work out of there highlighted, and we'll have some other things going on. So we encourage you to check that out, 4 to 6 p.m. To the resident earlier with questions about public records, I'm happy to follow up and look into those specific questions and get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Members? David?
Yes, the new school building in West Acton opened at the beginning of the school year. If anybody has not seen the building, I'd encourage you to go park in West Acton, walk up to the building. It's a beautiful new building. The project is not yet complete, however. Over the next year or so, the two old school buildings will be torn down, and the pieces of the project that are going to go where the old buildings were will be constructed. In the case of Douglas, that's a ball field, and in the case of Gates, that's staff parking and a solar array above the parking. Unfortunately, the opening of the school was marred by the discovery of some anti-Semitic graffiti inside the elevators of the building. I think that happened on the first day of school. I apologize to anybody in our town who was offended by the graffiti, and we have a long-standing policy here that we accept everyone for who they are, and so I'm sure everyone else is also upset by this discovery. Thank you.
Thank you. Imogen.
Thank you. Just want to echo what David said again. I'm really glad you brought that up. The anti-Semitic comments that were found at the school is very disheartening. And so I think that it's good that this school took an adequate response. And so really just thanks to the school and staff for really making sure that that got addressed, especially since we want this opening of our new building to be an inclusive event for all students, an inclusive space. I don't know how much I want to dive into the comments that were made before. I don't want to add fuel to the fire, but I will end with saying thank you to the people who reached out to offer their support, and just want to remind people that quoting people directly is personal. You may not have to name them by name, but by quoting them, you're pretty much putting them on the table. And those words, I believe, were intentionally used because I am a young person on this board. I don't know if those words would have been used in another context for another person, and that's why I felt the way I did. But I will say this, and I'm ending it here, only to just really make sure that we are creating a safe and inclusive space for young people, even beyond me, to be involved. And I also want to give thanks to the people who also reached out, people of color, people who are proud of being immigrants, and being an immigrant can mean that you're a citizen and you're naturalized and you've lived here for a long time. So just want to thank people who reached out and were vulnerable and shared their stories, and we'll continue to make sure that that's represented. But that's it from me.
Thank you. Oh, Fran.
I didn't want to give the comments more oxygen either, but I will, in that I thought that I felt that Himija was attacked for being a new board member. The issue wasn't an attack on the police department in any way, who I hold a really high regard for. It was just taking a simple task of delegating a task to the town manager instead of the police. So I think it was taken out of context, and Hima just shared her perspective, and I'm happy to hear perspectives of board members, citizens, constituents, no matter any age. So that's it.
Thank you. So for my update, we also on Sunday, we had a brief 9/11 Remembrance Ceremony in front of the Public Safety Building that I provided some remarks for. It was, as always, for the last 20-odd years, it was a moving situation. I think it brings us the understanding once again what a perilous time we live in, and how really fortunate we are that we have so many dedicated people that are willing to step up for us, police, firefighters, EMTs. That was also brought to my attention as well through a personal situation at my house with my wife, who was injured, and all I can say is she's recovering well, but the dedication and the quick response from the fire department and the true care that they show to everyone in town is certainly very moving to me. As far as the other situation, the comments that have gone back and forth, I think it shows how polarized the town can quickly become, that some seemingly innocuous comments can get spun, and the next thing you know, people are firing off emails back and forth. I personally very much support absolute First Amendment rights for everyone to come here in this forum and everywhere else in town to be able to make their statements to the Select Board. And I certainly hope that respect is shown from this side of the board to the audience and from the audience to this side of the board. It's been a rough couple of years, and hopefully we can dial down everybody's temper and try to let some things maybe can just be shrugged off from time to time, not to minimize anybody's feelings in any way, but we can't go to war every time somebody makes a statement from either side of the board. Thank you. That said, we'll entertain our first piece of new business, discuss Select Board Liaison to the 250 Committee. And let me just start by stating that I'm personally committed and very interested in serving as the liaison from the Select Board to that committee. This has been a passion of mine for many years, certainly local history and national history. I recently have been starting to do a series on ActonTV about Acton's history. There's 2 episodes up right now. I felt strongly enough that this was one of the goals that I put forward and actually invested a number of my votes into it. And I think, since I'm glad that it was backed by the board and that the charge that I presented, there was some back and forth with it, which I think made it a stronger charge. I think it's important to have wide representation on this sort of committee, and certainly as a Select Board liaison to the committee, I would pursue that to make sure that everyone's voices get heard and that we have a really nuanced discussion of all of the events leading up to and soon thereafter of April 19th, 1776. So in keeping with the practice of the board, as the person that puts the idea forward, works on the charge, for better or for worse, usually ends up as a liaison. And a couple other folks to my right here have certainly experienced that. Don't come up with an idea unless you're planning on working on it. So I would like to be appointed as a liaison to that committee. Comments?
Move to approve. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm supportive of Dean being chair. I think that it's going to be difficult to get good representation on this committee. I also, I actually happen to chair two committees where I would prefer that I don't, because I think it's frankly a little incestuous to have an advisory committee chaired by a member of the board. That's just really odd to me. But unfortunately, sometimes someone doesn't step up to do it. I think it's better if as liaison and the select board member that you weren't chair of that committee, but it may end up being that way.
In response to that, I agree with you that these things should not be pushed around by the select board members, and I would dearly love to not be the chair, only be the liaison. Never know what's going to happen once the committee is formed. Fortunately, a number of people have stepped forward, either formally or informally, and said they'd like to serve on the committee and they would be happy to serve as chair. So I would I respect your comments, and I certainly approve them, David. Other comments? Okay. I will entertain a motion then. Or
We usually just do the thumbs up thing.
Okay, all in favor? Hey, all right. Yeah, let the record show, 5 thumbs up. Thank you very much. And we'll be, I'll work with the town manager and volunteer coordinating committee. We'll reach out widely. We have received some interest already, and hopefully we can get this thing rolling in October, early November, that sort of a time frame. Item 6, discuss Indigenous Peoples Day. Yes, sir.
All right, I go? Okay, so yes, we're really excited for this year being together.
Someone's making a comment.
We've got
someone's making a comment.
one member of the public just came up.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I thought there was going to be a little bit of discussion. Anyway, Nijan Datta, Wincliffe Drive. At the last meeting, David Martin made some egregious remarks in response to some of us who spoke at the prior meeting about the 250 committee. Much of his remarks were directed at my comments. His main objection was that keeping the focus only on the events of that period was exclusionary. Of course it is, when used in the proper sense. To commemorate the 250th anniversary of a singular event, we must by necessity not dilute it with all of our other irrelevant grievances. My comment about not wanting the event to be hijacked by people who are anti-American was taken as symbolic of why some people avoid town gatherings. Really? I want to meet those people. If they aren't anti-American, why would they care since I wasn't talking about them? Worse, my statements were taken to mean an attack on immigrants who supposedly would not feel welcomed. For the record, I am an immigrant, and my comments were not directed at immigrants, most of whom would know exactly what I'm talking about. They were largely directed at those native-born Americans who have no clue how good they have it. So let me be clear about what I mean when I say that I'm worried about celebrating this event in ways that would be unrecognizable to the people who actually fought that day. For example, the battle was between the British and the colonials. Don't many of our school committee members and perhaps some select board members think the colonials is a dirty word, rooted in patriarchy and racism and white supremacy? Since it was so offensive to even have it as a mascot, how can a person who objected to the word colonial even be on this committee? David objected by mentioning the 1619 Project, which is premised on America's founding being fundamentally due to slavery, and so everything that came after that is evil due to that original sin. In the same way I don't want intelligent design to be taught in our schools, I don't want this grossly incorrect 1619 Project to be anywhere near our schools, and I don't want a person who believes in that theory to be on the 250 committee. Those quote-unquote exclusions are no different than excluding an avowed white supremacist to be on the committee celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. Day. The really outrageous thing you said is that we took the opportunity to diss black people. I hope you apologize for that, as it comes close to slander. I did no such thing, and neither did any of the other 4 people who spoke. Finally, you used the word exclusion multiple times. The irony is rich, given the number of times you have excluded Charlie Cadlick and me, from even asking questions in the DEI committee meetings. You even gave Charlie a cockamamie answer that this is because the members felt unsafe. What exactly do you expect Charlie to do to your commission members? Using your own requirements that membership in the DEIC requires a commitment to the principles of DEI, we want the 250 committee to be composed only of people who truly love the principles that were fought for on that freedom-loving day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tara Fredericks, Mass Ave. I'm not opposed to the 250 committee. I just hope that we keep it in perspective. 1619 is not a theory, it is history. It's a series of facts that haven't been taught in the established institutions, and it's time that we start teaching those facts. Relative to 250 committee, where 2 parties, colonials and Great Britain, are fighting over land that wasn't theirs to begin with, I was tolerant until I heard about the 1619 project being represented as a theory. So if we're talking about facts, I think it's important for the 250 committee to recognize that this is, in fact, a celebration of two parties that were fighting over land that wasn't theirs. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Select Board, I wasn't planning to comment, but because Mr. Charter got to be the liaison to the committee, but I do have some additional comments. Janet Adachi, Simon Hatfield Lane. I would just like to remind everybody that the 250th anniversary is an occasion for all of us to celebrate, regardless of ancestry, and it's also a great opportunity to learn in depth about the times and the people. It isn't some sort of racist endeavor by people who are resistant to change in our community. I'll share an anecdote, which is illustrative. In July, my college roommate and her husband visited from Los Angeles, so they and my husband and I had a wonderful day in Lexington and Concord, immersing ourselves in a colonial history in which our respective ancestors played no role. One stop was the North Bridge, of course, where we took group photos in front of Daniel Chester French's Minuteman statue. And yes, I explained the connection to Acton farmer Isaac Davis and his plow. There we were, my Italian-American husband, my roommate descended from American slaves and members of the Cherokee Nation, her Jewish-American husband, and I, a Japanese-American. How different things might have been if the revolution had failed, or if the English hadn't settled here, or other Europeans had, or if Europeans hadn't reached the New World. The four of us posing in front of that statue on a hot July afternoon might not have been here today. All things considered, flaws and all, we are glad we ended up in this country. I look forward with great interest to seeing the work of the Anniversary Committee unfold. Thank you.
Thank you. David.
So I'd like to be clear here, because this keeps getting said over and over, that somehow I excluded people from speaking at DEIC meetings. So I don't exclude anybody individually from DEIC meetings. I don't allow anybody to make comments at DEIC meetings. And you know why? We used to allow people to make comments at DEIC meetings. And then in about the middle of our tenure, people were getting up week after week and saying that there was no that there was no racism in town, that there was various comments again and again in these meetings. And that was just untenable after a time. So we just stopped comments altogether. You know, the fact that the black members of this committee were being told that, you know, certain events, either national or local, were not racist. You know, people from the outside trying to tell a generational black American family that something is not racist, they have no position. It just got to be untenable after a time. And so we decided to remove comments and invite people to submit comments via email. And we often will read the email comments when they come in.
So, I think we've pretty much dealt with the whole situation of the 250 committee, and I'd like to move on. I had just recognized Imogen Nagaretti to begin discussion of her suggestions for Indigenous Peoples Day proclamation, and I will would like to have Imogen continue with her comments.
Thank you. Sorry, I overspoke with some of the residents' comments. Did not mean to. So yes, in terms of the resolution, so as people may remember, last year, David, one of our select board members, drafted up a resolution for Indigenous Peoples Day, but we wanted to make sure that we were prioritizing the voices of Indigenous people when writing this proclamation. And so the past couple of months, I've been working to try to do that. So would like to give a few shout outs and also talk about the process through which we came to this. So I first reached out to Dan Bodillon, and thank you to the town manager and other people who helped me connect with Dan. Dan and I had a discussion, and for people who may not know, Dan is a historian, a local historian on Indigenous people. He himself is not Indigenous, which is something that he makes very clear, which is great. But he's done a lot of work researching the history and has connections to Indigenous tribes in the area. And so he kindly looked over the resolution and just edited a little bit for historical and cultural accuracy. We then sent it to members of the Neshoba tribe leadership. And so this is the resolution you have in front of you today that's been edited. I did want to note, though, that one of our, one person that we did contact for to edit the resolution, she did mention that there was a family loss, and so she didn't have much time to look it over. So one thing that I would propose, if the board is okay with it, is for me to let her know that there's like a little bit more time for her to review this and make any changes, and then maybe vote this in more formally on October 3rd, which is cutting it very close to when we want this done by October 8th. But we're hoping that that'll give the tribe enough time to look this over and still have the time they need for their family. The other thing, kind of tangentially to this, that I wanted to mention was we're planning a Indigenous Peoples Day event at the Acton Memorial Library. So I want to give a huge shout out to Maria and Zoe, who have been really helpful in just trying to work together and make this event happen at the library. So this is going to be an official library event. October 8th is the day we're planning on having it from 12 to 1 p.m. And this will be an event where we're going to have Dan provide a little bit of history and that historical and cultural current day context of Indigenous people. Then we're planning on having members of the Neshoba tribe also give a sermon and a performance and open it up for Q&A after. So that's the plan for the 8th, because we wanted to make it a weekend so that way people could attend. But officially, Indigenous Peoples Day is the 10th of October. So just wanted to give that context of the work that we've been doing so far, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Comments from the board? Jim.
Thanks for working on this, and thanks for making contact, with the local Indigenous folks. I was wondering if there'd been outreach yet to anyone in the Nipmuc Nation. There seemed to be some interesting, I don't know whether it raises to the level of controversy or whether it's just an interesting point about whether, whether it's more accurate to talk about the Neshoba Nation or the Nipmuc Nation as being the inhabitants or those those who are living here pre-contact.
That's a really good question. So to answer, no, I haven't spoken to anyone from the Nipmuc tribe directly. One thing that we did want to do is try to keep the language as general as possible to accommodate for the fact that there are land disputes, understandably, because even our records of history are oftentimes inadequate. And so Dan did keep that in mind when making those edits. But if you do have any contacts at Nipmuc that you would recommend I reach out to just to make sure things look okay on their end, we can do that. But that was something that was intentional, and we actually did we actually did broaden the language in a lot of places in the proclamation to accommodate for that.
Comments from other members of the board? Fran.
I just wanted to thank you, Himija, for doing this, and I can't wait for the October 8th celebration.
All right. So I'm really happy that you've suggested that we hold off the vote on this until October 3rd. I had a couple of thoughts, which I'll share with you, with all respect, and thank you for your diligence in working on this and the folks that have supported you. So here's kind of a random assortment of thoughts. I think it's important now that that the draft of the proclamation is available on the town website or in the in DocuShare. So I would certainly hope that people who are interested have a chance to read it and reflect upon it. And I hope that we can set some time aside on October 3rd. So if we have comments from the public, they can make those comments. Anytime you try to change people's perception of history, obviously, there'll be lots of thoughts in one direction or another. A couple, hopefully you'll accept these as helpful comments. I think the content of the proclamation is great, but if I was to suggest anything, I would suggest editing it downward a little bit, because somebody's going to have to read this, and it'll probably be you. And it's pretty lengthy. And try to focus it specifically on the impact of this upon Acton and Middlesex County. I think that would make it a more powerful statement. I would also make the observation that, and I think that the board should recognize this, is that the history of Columbus Day was first celebrated, so far as I could tell, in 1792 in New York City. And it was sponsored by a group of primarily Catholic individuals to support the history of Columbus and in response to a lot of anti-Catholic bias. The first national recognition of the day was in 1898, and that was in response to huge discriminatory actions and lynching of 11 Italian immigrants in Louisiana. And the president at that time declared this, he had planned on it being just a one-off event, recognizing Columbus Day as a way to recognize and hopefully deal with some of the discrimination that Italians, Irish, and primarily Catholics had been subjected to in this country. So I think it's important to recognize that although we might be changing this day and talking about the horrendous impact that colonization had on the indigenous population, but I think that it's important that we don't discount the discrimination that other ethnic groups experienced in this country long after Columbus, and that we are not now starting to discriminate against other groups. So I think that's important to look at that nuance of that. It's important to recognize that there are many groups in this country who have received very poor treatment by the prevailing culture. And say in 1898, the attempt was to try to hold out an olive branch to the Italian Catholic community. And I think we do need to recognize that piece of history. Other than that, I've read through the agenda for the Indigenous Peoples Day. I think it's excellent. And this is kind of the sort of event that I hope that we can have a number of, and I'll sort of use this as a blueprint for some suggestions we might have for the 250th committee. Comments from other members of the board? Himiger, please.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, no, just wanted to echo, really excited for the event. We're really grateful that that Quiet Storm and Strong Bear, who are part of the Nishoba tribe leadership, are willing to come to this event and for accepting our invitation. And so that'll be really fun. They are also doing a event in Littleton like the weekend before. So it'll be good. And Dan said that he's never seen an event with like less than 100 people with them. So it's hopefully something that will also continue. And yeah, hopefully this will be a good event. And yes, thank you for those comments. And I think that I agree. Opening up, for people to provide input, before October 3rd is a good idea. So emails, and we can also maybe also have a space for commenting during the October 3rd meeting, I think would be a good idea. But yeah, exactly. Doing it on a ground of respect and mutual benefit, I think will be good.
Thank you. Comments from the audience?
Tara again. Thank you for this work. I think it's fabulous. I don't want to intend to try and constrain your speech. I do urge you, though, to not speak more than the tribal leaders. Relative to Columbus, the slaughtered people, and I don't want to laud any murders of Christians. I also don't want to forget the facts. So, but I originally stood up here to urge the 250 committee to integrate the findings and the statements from the Indigenous work that's being done to remind us of the history and Indigenous Peoples Day history that Himage has been doing might be a great way to bridge some gaps and to start to knit our community together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Cheryl Kennedy Perez, again from Harris Street. Italian Americans, Irish Americans, Portuguese Americans, Arab Americans are not Indigenous. It's different. And it's not less than, it's not more than, but if you're going to have something called Indigenous People Day, then I think, especially now, it's really important that we have good definitions, that we're accurate in what we're talking about, that we have a model for our children about, everybody blows it, by the way. Everybody blows it. Everybody blows it. We blow it now, we learn, and that's what's important, but not to mix apples and oranges just because negative things happen to both the apples and the oranges. It's just to be true to the name is to be true to the definition, and even though all of the people that you mentioned have been discriminated against, and some continue to be, they're not Indigenous peoples.
Thank you.
Scott Smyers, Central Street. Why, there already is an Indigenous Peoples Day on August 9th. My question is, why does it have to be moved to replace another holiday or to October?
I will ask Imogen to comment on that.
I'm not really sure. Are you talking about like another, like maybe UN recognized holiday or something? Because per my understanding, Indigenous Peoples Day, we're looking for that to we're looking for that to be October 10th, and that's how it's been. It's the second Monday in October, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, but there is an Indigenous Peoples Day on August 9th that's been there for a long time that would avoid irritating, disrespecting Italians, Catholics that went through quite the persecution. I mean, we have to realize that the world was a lot different back in the 1400s and 1500s. And it was very brutal back then all around the world. Columbus was no, exception, right? That was happening around the whole world. But what does happen in America is we treat people equally, and And the history of Columbus Day, as recounted by the chair, is my understanding of that too, and that's very important to remember and not to marginalize and replace with another holiday if we already have a good holiday for it. And that's why I don't think that this is really the intent of this. The intent of it is to drive a wedge in our community, to irritate some people that are trying to stick to certain traditions and point the finger at them using imprecise language, using new language rules that we heard about earlier tonight, about how some people think you should be able to criticize comments of public officials. Some people get their feelings hurt and can't handle the criticism, apparently. That's what I'm hearing, and the defense of that is just, it's getting worse and worse, and I'm very concerned about this being just another, it's not original just happening in Acton here. It's happening across the whole country. They've picked this particular date. They want to go at it, and we have to be careful of that and be cautious. And I just don't think it's worth the effort.
Thank you. Imager.
Is it okay if I respond to that?
Yes.
Okay, so I looked it up. August 9th is International Day of the World's Indigenous People. That's a UN-recognized holiday. The US doesn't automatically recognize UN-recognized holidays unless we explicitly state it. And so that's another point entirely. I will end it there. It's very upsetting that every time I speak, it ends up coming across as me being unable to be critical or be able to be criticized. That's not the case at all. I respect people's opinions. I will end it there, and I would just ask if that could just please be moved over on, because I can't keep talking about that.
Thank you.
Hi, Nijan Datta, Wincliffe Drive. I wasn't even going to speak on this. I didn't even know this was going to come up. But, well said, Scott. I mean, this is due to driving a wedge between, getting Columbus out of the way. And basically, as part of the 250 committee, the whole thing about America being fundamentally evil, the tarnishing of Columbus is really fundamentally about basically breaking America's moral role and casting it in negative terms rather than positive terms. And so I just looked it up. I thought I was right, but I looked it up. We already have a Native American month. November is Native American month. So Native American Day on Columbus Day, and there's also, I mean, we have a month for women, we have a month for Black Americans, we have a month for Hispanic Americans, we have a month for Native Americans. We've got all these months. So we don't need to fight over Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day. Personally, Columbus, in my mind, his pluses outweighed the minuses. That's why I'm here, because of him. All right, yes, he did bad things. So did everybody else. And like Scott said, you don't judge a person just by some of the bad things he did, and some of the bad things he did was not even out of the ordinary compared to the culture he lived in. So given that they have a month, I don't know why Columbus shouldn't have a day. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim.
A couple thoughts. There is also an Italian-American Heritage Month, happens to be October. So those months are there. But there's a particular reason to switch away from Columbus Day being October 9th. Here's the first part. It's a really awful way to celebrate being Italian. An Italian-American Heritage Month is a wonderful way of celebrating being Italian. But celebrating a guy who, was the first person to, kidnap Native Americans and take them back and sell them as slaves is not an occasion to come together on. Columbus was awful enough as governor that he was thrown out because he was being so cruel. There was a lot of dismemberment. There was a lot of, extrajudicial killings. There are a lot of crimes. Columbus is not a great person to celebrate. Being Italian is a wonderful thing to celebrate. So to separate the two is a fine thing. Also, because of the particular harms that he did were so, focused on the indigenous people who were there. It's a delightfully poetic way to place Indigenous Peoples Day there. It says, we're going to be understanding more deeply the experience of Indigenous people through the contact period with the Europeans. So I'm very happy with the direction this is going in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alyssa Nichols, School Street. As Himija mentioned, August 9th is an international holiday, not an American holiday. So that's one reason to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. But the more important reason is because the Indigenous people in this country are asking us to, and they have been asking us to for decades. Massachusetts, and Acton is a town in Massachusetts, is working currently on legislation. So I think it would be good for our town to follow along with what the state efforts are. I'd also like to draw attention to Italians for Indigenous Peoples Day, and I will just read for you their statement because I am not Italian American. We are Italian Americans who stand in solidarity with thousands of Native peoples from many tribal nations who live in Massachusetts who are working to rename Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. We believe that a holiday that celebrates the resilience of Indigenous peoples is far more truthful and uplifting than one that honors a man whose legacy is characterized by conquest, slavery, and genocide. While Italian Americans enjoy recognition and status in this country, these are not privileges afforded to Native peoples. Studies have shown that they are essentially invisible in our society. This perception is caused by racial stereotypes that dehumanize them, white Americans' lack of interaction with them, biased history taught in schools, and insufficient curricula on past and present Indigenous cultures. For them, the celebration of a man responsible for the genocide of their ancestors is another painful reminder of the ways in which they continue to be made invisible. By championing Indigenous Peoples Day, we celebrate the diverse histories and cultures of this land's first peoples and their many contributions to modern society. We correct false histories, begin to make amends for past atrocities, and support Indigenous struggles for justice. We also honor our own ancestors who persevered in this country despite being victimized for their ethnicity, and we follow the example of the many Italian Americans throughout this country's history who fought for civil and human rights for all. My family and I lived in Italy for 3 years, and the Italians that we interacted with while we were there do not celebrate Columbus the way Americans do. Their heroes are Giuseppe Garibaldi and their Vittorio Emanuele, the first king of Italy. And I think that this effort right now to change Indigenous Peoples Day so that we can go along with the Acton-Boxborough School District, which has recognized it for several years, and the state of Massachusetts is a fabulous endeavor. So I thank you.
Thank you. All right. We have one more comment, and then we're going to move on. We've got a very lengthy agenda here.
I have a question. The agenda says, discuss Indigenous Peoples Day and proclamation. What kind of proclamation do you have in mind?
So the proclamation was listed in the packet.
I didn't see it, sorry.
Can
you sum it up for me?
I actually have a copy of it right here. I'd be happy to share with you.
Well,
yep.
Okay, well, the other comment quickly, thank you. Well, I won't read it now. Is this really a job for the board, select board? I mean, this is basically American history, you can go back as far as you want, and prior to the indigenous people, there were some other tribe. As you know, I was born in Europe. The number of different tribes and groups that occupied the land where I happened to be born, going back a few thousand years, would probably take several years to just list. And more importantly, to my knowledge, nobody cared. It happened. Okay, here we are. What's more important is what's happening now. And believe me, there's plenty to worry about. I think this is an interesting issue, but to repeat, I don't see why the Select Board has a role in defining how do we adjust history to meet the current preferences.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to discussion of the revised American Rescue Plan Act investment plan. Mr. Mangiarotti.
Thank you. At the August 22nd meeting, we provided an update on the investments that were approved by the Select Board last year and how the $7 million from the American Rescue Plan Act fund has been allocated and spent so far. After that meeting, we reached out to all the stakeholders within the municipal organization, and as well as our partner organizations like the Regional School District and the Water District and others to solicit ideas and input for the board to consider for the funding needs. As you recall, last year the board allocated $5 million out of the 7.1 that is available. Approximately $2 million were left in reserve for future use. Approximately $1.35 million of those reserves were earmarked in a way that wasn't binding, but in a way that the board wanted to mention. And so the work before the board now, and we've laid out a 3-meeting process, well, 4-meeting if you count the 22nd, and then we'll talk about it again tonight. This is a listening session where members of the public or others may give their input on ideas or concerns they have about the ARPA program. And then on October 3rd, the Select Board would discuss the updated priorities as outlined and potentially take a vote at that meeting or the next meeting, which is later in October. So in the initial stakeholder engagement since the August 22nd, within the town operations, we've identified approximately $3.3 million in additional projects. And this is in addition to what was earmarked, and in addition to what was requested last year. So, you were presented with $12 or $13 million worth of ideas last year. The list has grown as the priorities have and new information has become available. And we've also received updated requests from the Acton Water District, from the Regional School District, and we got a request also from the Acton Housing Authority. So I will briefly mention the projects that have come forward for us in terms of internally, just for the board to know, and we'll be providing this information in writing ahead of your next meeting. The first item is the South Acton Wastewater Treatment Plant. The town meeting last year approved a rehabilitation project for the South Acton plant due to changes in the industry and the markets and everything else. The cost increased higher than we had anticipated, and so we actually had to cut some things out of the final contract that we've executed. So there's approximately $1.3 million in additional needs to do the work that we had planned to do, in addition to looking at the next phase of a study that the board allocated funding to start this year, which was to look at the rapid infiltration basins that we have. There are a series of them that you'll see as you're driving or walking down High Street over to the right. And we're identifying through a study a way to add an additional rapid infiltration basin on that property. And so we're seeking funding to do the next phase of design for that effort. Another project is an intersection that the board approved a redesign of, and we have a 75% design completed, and that is the Hayward Road and Main Street intersection, where a traffic signal and several other traffic safety measures are proposed for that area. It's a rough estimate of $1 million right now, but that would be fine-tuned as the design process continues. A project that is actually on the agenda later in this meeting is something that's been in the capital plan, in our 10-year plan, which is to redo the parking lot behind us here. The parking lot is heavily used by the town hall and also by the library and other users of the center here. It's in need of repair, and we'd also like to make some substantial improvements to the pedestrian circulation and traffic circulation there. That's a project that we've estimated to come in at over $500,000. There's a culvert in serious need of replacement on the Jenks Conservation Land. That's a project that it's a little bit early to know how much it's going to cost, but we know that we need funding to start the design process so that we can hopefully seek additional funding in the future. This is a culvert that the board, I think someone mentioned there was an issue there last year, and it's something that we need to take a look at. Another item is the Council on Aging has a concept to create a senior center cafe. We have a beautiful commercial kitchen over at 30 Sudbury, and we provide daily meals. We've actually recently started providing a continental breakfast, but this would be a program to really step it up and provide a cafe to try to generate some more foot traffic there and more people that want to spend some more time at the facility. And we're estimating that would be $100,000 for startup costs, and then we would work that in to the operating budget going forward. I can mention the Acton Water District request, unless, oh, never mind, I'll leave that to the Acton Water District. The Acton Housing Authority request, I can mention that they were seeking $500,000 towards the McManus Manor 41-unit senior and affordable rental facility, where the current Kennedy Landscaping building is now. The Transportation Advisory Committee, again, is advocating for investments in the transportation program in the amount of approximately $450,000 to run a second CAT bus. And we received another request from a private entity, which I'm not sure is represented tonight either. Oh, it is, okay. I'll leave it at that. Those are the things that came in from our internal stakeholders.
Okay, thank you. So what I'd like to do now is to listen to comments, suggestions, applications from obviously the Water District and other interested parties. I think I'd like to hear the discussion, hear the presentation, and then after we've exhausted anyone coming in here with requests, probably just some brief question and answer for clarification sake amongst the members of the board. So,
hi, I'm Steve Stuntz. I'm current chairman of the Acton Water District. I'm at 27 Central Street. And some of my fellow commissioners, one of my fellow commissioners here, but on another topic. As we stated in our letter to you, we are here to request $1.3 million from the ARPA funding. This represents the excess cost of the Kelly's Corners project over our allocation from internal structural funds. We allocate infrastructure funds every year, and they build up over time, and we had put aside $1.1 million towards the Kelly's Corner project. That project came in, as you all know, for the Water District, $2.4 million. It was originally estimated at 1.7 by the engineers, but it came in at 2.4, so we're $1.3 million short. Quite honestly, we have to do it. We would have to borrow for it. We would rather not. We have plenty of projects out there for PFAS. We are presently adding $10 million to our debt to bring it to $37 million for the North Acton PFAS treatment. We are piloting South Acton and Central Acton plants for PFAS removal. So we will be adding a tremendous amount of debt. And so we would like to mitigate that cost to are combined users, because both of us are serving the same group of people. So we would like to ask for that help. The water district generating. The Kelly's Corner project, as we all agree, is an important piece of keeping Acton what it is, and so is the availability and the purity of the Acton Water District. So the infrastructure is important for both of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, if we got any clarification questions, let's do those right now.
Sure, David.
Hi. Do you know why the cost went up for Kelly's Corner beyond the original estimates?
I believe the big price was the piping, the steel in the water mains.
So the actual material cost of probably iron water mains, right? Yeah. So probably just the material cost of those in the current economic environment went up.
Yeah, and maybe it'll come back down, but then the contractor will do well. This is a totally contracted price. I don't know if there are any unit pricing in there that helps us, but I expect it'll come in at 2 point. That has 5% contingency in it. The 2.4 has 5% contingency in it. But it was really between the 1.7, I take it you mean, and the 2.4.
Yes.
It was material.
Any other questions from any other members of the board? All right, you got one question from the audience.
And actually, if this is an invitation for proposals, which from what I understand it is, I would like to propose that some of that money pilot a renter advocate for a year. I would like to get some of that money for the structural study, since we were proposing a feasibility study for the Affordable Housing Trust, that the economic feasibility study that was passed at town meeting is separate from the sort of structural choices of governance, and perhaps that could pay for that. But I also want to point out that the idea of spending recovery money on expanding sewers for developers or whatever, first of all, I believe that the town bylaw states that the sewer has to be paid for by sewer users. And so I don't believe that expansion can be paid for out of recovery money that's supposed to be spent on everybody. I highly recommend paying for the Acton Water District project. That's something that's going to reduce our costs. We have to do these projects. We have to fix the PFAS situation. And so I urge you to spend on those things instead of RIB expansion. And I'll have questions later about how the phase 1 or whatever it was referred to as RIB design, who is paying for that? If that's the current users, why would they be paying for future users? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening. Erica Amirlin, 534 Old Stonebrook. I'm here tonight in my capacity as president of board of the NAGOG treatment facility. I came before you during the last round of ARPA funding. Just a quick reminder, we serve North Acton. We provide sewer services to NAGOG Woods, to Henley Road, to the NAGOG Mall, and to all of the office park. We are a not-for-profit, privately owned sewer facility. We are not eligible for state revolving fund money, so the big pool of money at zero interest is not available to us. We received $150,000 of ARPA funding from the town last year in the initial allocation, and we are back to request an additional $150,000. Originally, we had requested $300,000 last year, so we received half of our request, which we have not been able to use yet, unfortunately, due to the lengthy procurement process. But costs, like everyone else, our costs have significantly escalated in order to do the infrastructure work that we would like to complete on the plant. And $300,000 would cover the escalated cost of doing all of the work that we have planned. Currently, we are looking at, in the absence of full ARPA funding, having to borrow additional money privately through our bank to fund the balance of our infrastructure work. We had a capital plan recently completed by an engineer, and the work that we need to do over the next decade is on the order of $5 million. So having a jump start on that with ARPA funding to knock off a preset, pre-scoped amount that was given to us by the engineer several years ago would really put us ahead of where we need to be. So we are respectfully asking to be considered for another $150,000 of funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the board? Jim?
I think last time, my understanding of the work, my memory of the work was that there's a lot of infiltration of water. And this is, a lot of this work is about fixing those, the in-leaks that are coming into your system. Is that still mainly the work?
That is correct, and that is what this would be used for. So it's called infiltration and inflow, and it's water, it's basically rainwater and stormwater that should not be in our system. And it involves a variety of small to medium-sized projects, including replacing pipes, manholes, et cetera. And we have a scope of work to do all of that infiltration, inflow reduction work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the members of the board? Thank you.
Thank you.
One last proposal to expand the senior tax relief and for rent relief. Thank you. To help people that exist here that are struggling dramatically. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the room? Yeah, I see that, yeah. All right, David.
As liaison to the school committee, and there's some logistic problems that they could not be represented tonight, can I represent their?
Sure.
So we had set aside $500,000 for possibly going to the school system in the second round, and they would like to, they sent us an email today, so the specifics are in there, but we would like to, money to be spent on some revenue replacement for down revenue, for infrastructure work to partially pay for the upgraded telephone system so that they can connect their buildings, and expansion of mental health services in the schools. So for those three things divided about evenly would be $500,000.
Okay, thank you. Jim.
David, will we be getting a more complete version of that in our email, or have we already gotten it?
You received it today.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I think there will be additional information coming to us in the next 2 weeks.
Great, thanks.
Okay. I believe we've got some people that wish to speak in the virtual audience out there.
Yes, Mr. Chair. The first one is Bettina Abe.
Okay, please go ahead.
Hi there, thank you. I'm Bettina Abe, Natural Resources Assistant, and I just wanted to update you on the Jenks Conservation Land Culvert Replacement Project that I've been working with our engineers at SLR, and we've revised the initial ask to be a first phase involving the bulk of the engineering services and some reaching out to regulators for pre-application guidance. And that would come to $80,000, and I can update you with a memo tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next up is Franny Osmond.
Go ahead, Franny.
Thank you. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I would wonder if this is the right time. Are we talking about the ARPA? I've been sort of half listening. And are we on the ARPA funding?
Yes, we are.
Decision?
Yep.
Okay. I want to make sure that I was listening correctly. And did you receive the money Did you receive, no money, did you receive the letter that I sent about Transportation Advisory Committee's request?
Yes, if you'd like to speak to that?
Yes, I would love to. The people, I don't know exactly how ARPA money is supposed to be spent on, particularly what defines it. But if we are talking about recovery from the pandemic, I really think we need to be thinking about our more vulnerable populations, people who are dependent on transit specifically, and who often lost that transit or had difficulty with work, or work was especially challenging if they were essential workers, or they lost jobs or were not able to work. And those people who we're thinking about when the Transportation Advisory Committee would like to see that money that was put in reserve from the ARPA money for $150,000 for each of 3 years spent to improve the CAT bus. My letter just pretty much spoke everything I wanted to say, that we reviewed the CAT bus, which is the fixed route that goes around town recently. And there are a lot of limitations with the limited funding that we have right now. How far it can go, how often it goes. There are a lot of details that would improve if we had a second bus and a second driver. And town staff have indicated that about $100,000 for the driver and about $30,000 to lease a vehicle, if that's what we had to do, could add another equal service to the CAT bus. And then you could have it coming more often. People wouldn't be discouraged from using it because it comes so rarely. And also people could use it to get to the train. We lost since the pandemic, we don't have the rail shuttle going. And some people might think, well, now there's space in the train station. But there are a lot of people who are dependent on the train, who don't drive, and who would really benefit from various parts of town, especially where there are a lot of renters over on 2A, being able to get to the train station and at reasonable times. And all that could be answered if we would spend some of this money on adding to the CAT bus. Now, it's not the best solution. There's other ways that we can do microtransit, which I can tell you about another time. Adding to our on-demand vans, but having more of the fixed route would answer a lot. And it's what I sent you was the ridership, and it's gone up and up, which has been wonderful. Over the last several months since it started, it went from like 40 people a month to almost 400. People have been riding it a lot, and they would ride it more if it was even more convenient. So anyway, not perfect, but it's a really wonderful addition to our community, and I would love if we would just spend that money and make it happen. Thanks.
Thank you.
And by the way, it's not just me. I just wanted to make clear that the Transportation Advisory Committee voted to request this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the last hand is from Catherine Buton.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Hi, so I just want to represent the Economic Development Committee. Catherine Yusoff, Maddie Lane, South Acton. I know there are so many competing priorities for this money, but to consider spending some of the money to support local businesses and or improve infrastructure to entice other businesses to town so that we might plan for the future and ensure our financial stability, and also, as we all would like, reduce the tax burden on residential, on the residents of Acton. Thank you.
Thank you. Imogen, did you wish to speak?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I did have a quick question for Catherine. You mentioned supporting local businesses. Was there any specific proposal you had for how we could do that with a certain amount of ARPA funds that you had in mind?
I don't have a specific amount. I know there was an item on the original list, I think it was P11, that had to do with wastewater treatment options on Great Road, which is a very important component to allowing existing businesses to expand, as well as being able to bring other types of businesses to Great Road. And there also was an example of something that Maynard's doing where they had a QR code that was in an advertisement in Action Unlimited that went to a really nice website that highlighted their restaurants, their businesses, and things that you could do in Maynard. So some marketing and or website work could potentially go a long way to increasing the visibility of some of our existing businesses.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? Please.
Cheryl Kennedy Perez, Harris Street. I am completely dependent on the cat. And you know what? I love it. I wish there were more. I absolutely want to support there being more. The drivers contribute to a sense of community. You don't get on the bus and it's like, you know, they know who you are. They know about where you're going. There's friendly conversation among residents as well as with the drivers. But I can't drive. I have a medical condition where I can't drive. For me to get into Boston to a specialist for a medical appointment, I have to set between basically 10 and 2 in order to be able to get back in time on the train to get the cat back to my apartment. And, you know, that's a reasonable amount of time, except if you're dealing with a specialist, which then it becomes a very unreasonable amount of time. And it's just, it's so limiting. You know, the last time it leaves the train station is 3:35. 3:35. Not 4 o'clock, not 5 o'clock, not any of the normal things where people would be doing their business. And to get on a bus, to a train, I mean, it takes a long time. I'm not complaining about the cat. I can't say enough about how they have saved me being here. But please, if you could put another one on, if they could double a shift so that they overlap, at whatever point in time, I certainly haven't done any kind of study on when it's used and when it's not used, but it would be really nice to expand the hours. It would be really nice to sometimes have it on the weekend. Like, you can't go anywhere on the weekend with the cat because it's just not there. But again, they're wonderful. The dispatcher will do anything to accommodate you, and the drivers are simply the best.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments or presentations? Well, so I guess on October 3rd, Mr. Manager, we'll have a little more detail on some of the town proposals.
Yes.
Thank you. Jim.
As a reminder, one thing that's new since the last time we tried to allocate ARPA money is we now have a climate action plan. I know our sustainability director is out on leave, so there might be a lack of staffing to take a look at priorities there, but if there is a way for the remaining town staff to look at the climate action plan and see about, high priority items that would fit into the ARPA categories that are otherwise unfunded, I'd be all in favor of looking at that too.
Thank you. David.
Just a question on process. Do we expect at our next meeting to have a list with the approximate prices we've heard today that we can go through and say, that sounds reasonable, that sounds too much, whatever we want to say? Or there was a meeting last time where we went through the list. And is that what we intend next time? And do we want that to be an interactive meeting with interactive totals again?
I think that would be my hope, is to be able to, come to closure on a lot of these issues. I think it all depends on what staff is able to provide between now and October 3rd. Mr. Manager, do you think you'll have the numbers down for us?
Yeah, we essentially have them now. The amount available is approximately $2 million. And we've heard about $7 or $8 million worth of ideas tonight. So we will put those all in one place, all on one sheet of paper. There is potentially a little bit of opportunity in looking at FY22 projects and 23 projects that could be modified a little bit, or in some cases entirely. But for the most part, all the projects that were allocated are in motion or are on their way to being in motion. And so I think really the amount of funding that we're really talking about here is in the range of $2 million. So it could be a quick conversation depending on what the board wants to do, because either way, we'll have it all written down in a way that is in front of you. And now that we have a few more things that weren't on our radar, we'll have those on the list as well.
I think there'll be a lot of disappointed people. Okay. Moving on. Discuss next steps for affordable housing trust funding. Mr. Manager.
Thank you. I'd like to call in our Planning Director and Zoning Enforcement Officer, Kristen Guichard. She's joining us virtually and has a brief presentation prepared, and I will set it up as she's getting logistically set up here. But if you recall, this year there was a citizen petition that was supported by town meeting to look at establishing affordable housing trust. This is related to a select board's goal from last year. Town meeting authorized $2,500 for this work, and Kristen and members of her team have looked at this, and we're bringing to you tonight our ideas for next steps to get your feedback before we move forward.
Hi, good evening, members of the board. I was going to do a screen share, if that's all right with you.
Please do.
All right, just let me know if you can see that okay.
Looks good.
All right. So as John mentioned, at annual town meeting, voters appropriated $2,500 to conduct the economic feasibility analysis of establishing an affordable housing trust fund that would focus on purchasing existing rental units and then making them affordable at affordable rents, rental prices. So we've reviewed the warrant article and the presentation, and we pulled together a proposed scope of work to implement this article. And this proposed scope of work includes the public engagement component to help define the parameters of the program in order to conduct that fiscal analysis. So the overall scope of work would include a virtual public workshop and an online survey where the same questions would be asked at both in order to make sure that everyone would have opportunities to provide that input. And that would help to define the parameters and detailed goals of the program. And that would be followed by a fiscal analysis to look at, one, running and managing the new trust, and then two, understanding the cost of buying a unit and renting it at an affordable price, and then maintaining that unit. And then we would be looking at a final public forum virtually to see, kind of a summary of the public feedback and how that informed those different options, and to hear public feedback on those considerations. So the first workshop and survey would include an introduction to the study, an overview of existing services that are provided by the town through the Acton Housing Authority and the Acton Community Housing Corporation, And then the study would include understanding where the public is and, where they feel there is a gap in service and what the measurable desires are and outcomes are. For example, questions that may be asked would be, should the units be bought down and then rented at 30% or 60% area median income or 80%, or possibly the community may want a mix of that. Does the town want them eligible on the subsidized housing inventory? And how many units would the town like to strive for per year? And then, does the town want to manage those rental units once they're acquired? Or does the town want to look to the Acton Housing Authority or possibly another agency that may have the capacity to manage them once they're acquired? So these questions would help to inform the financial analysis. For example, if the community wanted the town to act as a leasing agent, additional staff would be required, so we would need to know that. The financial analysis will look at both the cost for operating the program again, and then the cost to buy and then upkeep the unit. So the analysis will take into consideration that feedback from the public. Again, for example, if the town wanted the units to be eligible for the subsidized housing inventory, there are mandatory rehab requirements that are more stringent than normal building code. So DHCD has specific requirements, and there's a minimum size requirement, for example, as well. And one rehab requirement rehab requirements may be possibly less stringent if the town is not interested in having them included on the SHI or the subsidized housing inventory. But then if they're not on this SHI, and they're not SHI eligible, that reduces the available funding sources. So there are some factors for the community that are there. And the final virtual workshop would include a summary from the first virtual workshop and the online survey, explain how that informed the analysis, and then summarize the financial analysis, looking at different types of housing trusts and how they could run, and the cost for rehabbing and maintaining a rental unit based on that feedback that was provided. And then the goal really of that final workshop would be to collect the public feedback on those options. So that's what we pulled together. We reached out to the Regional Housing Services Office because we work with them, really on several different types of housing issues and maintaining the subsidized housing inventory for Acton. And we also reached out to Acton, who worked with the town previously on the housing production plan. They're both very familiar with the town's previously stated goals, specifically related to this particular item. They had a positive reputation, I think, in facilitating the public feedback through that planning process. And they both have extensive knowledge in the field and are actively working in our region, so they have a good understanding of the rental market, as well as DHCD requirements and funding sources, as well as the public process. So Jan Goldston, that's Jennifer Goldston's company, quoted us for $5,200 for 2 workshops if they're virtual. And then the analysis of the public feedback would be incorporated into that. And then the RHSO could potentially absorb the cost into the existing allocated hours that we have through the intermunicipal agreement with them. This would equate to about 45 hours, which is equal to $3,600. And the town, our staff, we could take on the cost of managing and operating the online survey to kind of take away some of the cost burden there. But this total recommendation or recommended scope that I kind of walked through here does, exceed the town meeting appropriation. But we do feel that it's necessary really to help to define the study, specifically what the public has for desires for the rental population served, meaning that, 30%, is it 50%, is it 60% area median income, who is the community looking to serve specifically? Because that will really dictate, the cost of rental units and what numbers we would be putting in as calculators. And then whether or not the community wants the town to be acting as a leasing agent, because that again will really dictate how much money the overall operation would cost. So we believe this would be the best approach to really discover this through the public process. And that's kind of what we laid out here.
Okay, thank you. Discussion from the board.
Yes, thank you, Kristen. For the public process, is there going to be some sort of proposal for the public to critique, or you just asking for or would the consultant just be asking for information about what the town would like to see in some kind of rehab trust?
So I think the first part is to explain for individuals that may not have maybe did not attend town meeting, but to first explain what the citizen petition article was, and then to explain what the town provides as existing services, and then to understand from the community where they may feel there is a gap, and then honing in on those specific questions that would help to inform the study. We were not able to find, in the presentation or the town meeting warrant article, anything that residents were aware of they were voting for in terms of what those questions that I kind of outlined in terms of what population specifically are we looking at, and how much does the town want to get involved in the actual leasing operation for rental units once they're purchased. And so some of those questions would be, I think, helpful to understand from the community in order to get really a broad spectrum of understanding going through the fiscal analysis. Otherwise, I think there would be a lot of assumptions being made by an individual if they were going to do that fiscal analysis, and it may not be what the community was looking for.
Right, I understand that would be valuable, so I think that's a good idea. I guess I quickly get down to some of the practical questions, like what are the pros and cons of various entities managing a trust, right? Because I know legally, I won't go on into them all here, but from information from the Regional Housing Services Office that different legal entities are restricted in different ways, and both in what they can do and what they, how efficiently they can procure services and lots of things. So would that kind of analysis be a separate step, or is that what you're proposing might be done by the RHSO?
I think it will depend on what feedback we hear from the community. The town meeting warrant article specifically stated a housing trust, which is very different than a non-for-profit housing corporation, but it is something that may be able to achieve the same thing. So if that seems like the direction that the community is stating, we could have them provide information on that type of structure. But I think it would be interesting for the first meeting to introduce the different types of structures that are available in order to achieve the goal of creating, an entity that buys existing units and then turns them around and rents them out at affordable rates.
Great, thank you.
Fran?
I think that the folks who were in a group talking about this have spoken to ACHC and the AHA and might see that structure falling within those two. And they can be transactional. So it wouldn't be necessarily a town leasing properties, is my understanding.
Jim.
Just to build on Fran's comments. So we do have, the group of people, some of them who are here tonight, who've been working on this idea for a couple of years. During that process, they've talked to a lot of people, maybe as many people as would show up at a public meeting. So we may be able to save, we may be able to get more quickly to the financial analysis if we see the work that they've done already, the spreadsheets that they've prepared, the questions they've come up against as the starting point. And I think the survey may not be needed either, in the sense that we have a near unanimous town meeting vote to say, hey, this is important, let's do something about this. And we have the select board goals from last year and this year about making progress on this question. So my first instinct is to start with, well, maybe procedurally, a meeting between the RHSO and your staff and the proponents, and go over, their spreadsheets and their thinking and their questions, and see how quickly you can go from there to, oh, okay, well then the main financial questions are, A and B, I'm not sure what they are, but like you raised some questions from the RHSO memo about the distance from the town in terms of the advantage being that you can get rehab done at less expensively if it's not a town entity doing the rehab. On the other hand, the spreadsheet relies on calculations that say if the town does borrowing of money, it acts like any other, developer, investor, and, gets units and then, gets money back to pay back the original borrowing, then it's a cash flow positive operation. I think that to me is the big question that needs some financial analysis is, does this basic notion make sense financially? And so that I would like to get as soon as possible to that question, to start from the proponent's basic ideas and study those, see if they hold up and see what questions arise. Thanks.
Imager.
Thank you. Building on Jim's question, Kristen, I was wondering if you could give us a little breakdown for what you think the timeline would look like. So like when you think the public workshop 1 could happen and, when number 2 can happen and things like that.
Sure. So, the thought process behind the first public workshop and the survey is really, we're not sure who was reached out to in terms of the analysis or the survey that was conducted previously. So this outreach would be, town-wide, posted on the town website, through our social media outlets, as well as, possibly through other methods. We have quite a good list growing now because we're working actually on a public engagement and networking connection project so that we're able to reach out to Acton residents, all Acton residents, not necessarily just property owners, to really engage further. So, that's kind of the hope there. And I think, we'd have to check with Jen Goldston on her specific schedule that she has available. But I think the questions that we'd be asking are pretty simple and probably wouldn't take too long to pull together. In terms of the questioning, we have seen some information that was provided to us just a few days ago with a spreadsheet that wasn't fully filled out. So there seems to be some pieces of information they're still trying to pull together. But, we're not sure exactly what the community as a whole were looking for from that based on what was voted on town meeting and what was in the spreadsheet that we saw. So we'd have to do some digging and really some more analysis there. It may take a little bit of time to actually look through and understand that spreadsheet. So that may take a little bit of time to sit down and hear from the original citizen petition submission group. And before we talk to Jennifer Goldston and get her timeline. So I'd say, I think it would be nice to get this done in the next 6 months. I don't think it's something that we need to sit on.
Well, I'm sort of torn by this. The request from the citizens group and the citizens petition was for $2,500. And that was what was approved at town meeting. That was what we bought. So I'm very reluctant to expand the scope of this. Frankly, I think that the $2,500 request was unrealistically low. But that was what was voted and approved at town meeting. So I would be very reluctant to come up with additional funding unless the proponents have a source, a non-public source, or a non-town of Acton source to supplement the request. They could have asked for any amount and got it approved at town meeting within reason, and they didn't. They chose to ask for $2,500. That said, I think that this deserves some scrutiny, and obviously this could be a very complex undertaking, and I wouldn't want the town to go into it blind. So I'm really torn on this entire proposal. I do see, I believe, some folks in the audience who'd like to speak.
Brief history. Article 52 was a citizen's petition asking for that amount of money. There was some question as to that's enough, and Tara will address that in a minute. But what I want to say now is all of this you just heard, the three of us made the presentation at town meeting. We were not at all asked to participate in whatever the town was doing. If the town wants to look into affordable housing, they're free to do so. But what you just heard has absolutely nothing to do with Article 52. Nothing. I saw this on the agenda. You know, the word affordable housing has been used different ways for different projects, so that doesn't necessarily trigger anything. Wouldn't you think that somebody from the town, Mr. Manager, would have contacted the people who presented this article to the town meeting and at least asked them to participate with whatever you're doing? That didn't happen. I find that very unacceptable. Your turn.
Okay, John did reach out to us a few days ago to say that he was planning to put the topic on the agenda. I thought Dean made up the agendas, but okay. We were curious as to when is this, and we gave him basically all our information and then didn't hear back again until I stumbled on the agenda item on DocuShare. So I think that's unfortunate. If this is, I'm happy to collaborate for sure. We've been studying this stuff for 15 years. This isn't something that we've just been doing for a few months. We've studied the prices, the number of units, the affordability requirements. We've done a lot of work, and I don't have a problem with the town confirming that with surveys. But what I have a problem with is the 2,500 adding to another project that somebody else makes up without collaborating with us. I find that really unfortunate. Maybe that's the word you were looking for. But in terms of the 2,500, that's supposed to be for an economic feasibility analysis based on the information that's already been dug up by officials, RHSO, the planning department. We have all this data. And it's a matter of taking somebody that knows how to do these models and pumps this information into the model that they already have. They already know how to do this stuff. So I was working with somebody in AIR, actually a consultant that was brought on to work on a project in AIR, affordable housing rehab project. And I said, gosh, you turned this around for this price. Do you think you could do this? It's easier in Acton. We got all the answers already. And he said, yeah, 2,500 sounds reasonable. So that's what we proposed, the economic feasibility for the project that we have already constructed. And that's what we went around to the finance committee and everybody else to get them to support. So regardless of what the presentation at town meeting said, that's what people think they were buying. When they do an endorsement of an article, they grilled us. They grilled us on our numbers. They grilled us on everything. So I would like to give that a chance. I would like to get the $2,500, give it to this guy, and see what he can do with this, with the numbers that are already there. This is a guy who does this for a living. He does economic feasibility analysis for affordable housing projects, rehab projects, and the two scenarios that I would like to see is one, not close to the town, using market rates, and close to the town using the subsidies from the state and prevailing wage, because he told us that we could get $120,000 per unit for these rehab projects. And he and his clients have done this around the state over and over and over again. They know the players, they know how to do this work. So I urge you to give a chance to the proposal that we put forward and direct the town manager to hire this guy. It's under the $5,000, so it doesn't have to get competed. See what he comes up with. And if it's not satisfactory, well then, hey, we can go with Jen and whoever else, pay more and get them to do something else. I don't know. But the time is right to buy these units because, again, we're going through a same cycle where the units are going to start increasing in price dramatically. We need to get in front of that curve again and buy these units, or else we're just going to see people suffer and suffer and suffer and push people further west.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fran.
Tara, can I just bug you? What was your second? The first one was not close to the town using market rates. What was the second?
The second one would be like a creature of the town, some kind of trust that's owned by the town that would be using prevailing rates that would be probably highly subsidized, but then you can use the state subsidies of like 120 grand a unit. So they say, you know, so these experts are telling us.
Thanks.
Alyssa. Oh. Charlotte.
Hi, Alyssa Nickel. I don't know that this needs to be said because there are three of us here, but I'm going to say it anyway. There was a large group involved just in the last couple of years. I'm not sure what was happening for 10 years or 15 years that Charlie and Tara are referring to. But there was a group of, 12, 15 people that met several times and participated in the housing production plan update. And as a result of that group's participation in that update, the number one goal of the 2020 housing production plan has a focus on rehab. It says, goal number one, primarily rehab when it's possible, right? So we're gonna create affordable housing in Acton, not necessarily by building new housing. You can create affordable housing by rehabbing and deed restricting so that it gets on the subsidized housing inventory. That adds numbers, so it's creating affordable housing. The housing prices are going up, and I think everybody in town wants to keep control of skyrocketing prices in Acton. There are landlords, there are folks that are now part of the Housing and Climate Justice for Acton group, people that serve on town committees, a planning board member, a design review board, and historic district commission member. So these are folks that are pretty familiar, and they were, they're not able to be here either for personal or professional reasons. So you have us as the spokespeople, but there were a lot of people that were involved in the housing production plan process. And I feel like Jen Goldson's firm did a really fabulous job of reaching the public during that process. It was incredibly extensive public outreach surveys and focus groups and public forums, and they got a lot of public input, and the result was, again, a focus on rehab. So I feel like, the proposal that is in this memo, all these questions that need to be answered and analyses that need to be done, we envisioned, and I think we even said at town meeting, or at least in the outreach that we did to different town boards and committees ahead of time, or one-on-one meetings with select board members, was we want the economic feasibility analysis on the economics that we've already created, so that then we can move forward with the structural analysis. What exactly does it look like? And I know that there are very many different versions, and we even have a copy of the affordable, not affordable, but the housing trust that I believe Jen Goldson wrote. It's a document that she wrote, and I think that if we're going to go ahead and do that and hire this consultant to do more analysis, that it should happen after the economic feasibility, which is in the warrant article. And it's my understanding that we need to adhere to the warrant article language. And I know that last phrase, or take any other action relative thereto, is legalese for, if you want to do something different, it's okay and nobody will sue you. But it had overwhelming support. It passed almost unanimously. So I feel like the townspeople have already spoken that this is what they want to happen, an economic feasibility analysis of the proposal that this group brought forward. Thanks.
Thank you.
A couple of quick points. When this first came up among ourselves, I was the one who questioned Tara about the amount of money. We said, you know, it makes no sense, but she answered that already. Second point, what we said at town meeting was, we need to do something to get this started. We've been discussing this, as Tara said, for years. And, you know, there's all kinds of analysis and this and that and all this. What we presented to town meeting to say, this amount of money will get this started, and people voted for it. I think it is incumbent on town administration to do what town meeting voted. Not to change it, just to do it. That's what town meeting is for.
Thank you. Mr. John?
Yeah, thank you for all the comments. We acknowledge that a lot of work went into developing the citizen petition, and it was a successful effort. And once that was approved by the voters at town meeting, we took that direction to move forward on a project. If the select board would like me to hire Tara and Charlie's friend from AIR to do this work, I'm happy to do that. But we try to do things in a comprehensive way that just looks at the economic feasibility of what the town meeting asked us to do, and do it in the way that we think makes sense, whether it was 15 people involved in developing things that led to that or not. We'd like to try to have a wider net and get more people engaged. Hopefully all those people will stay engaged and continue to be involved in it, but we definitely could refine the proposal, knock it down a little bit. That seemed high for me too, $8,000, but I think it'll be hard to get it down to $2,500 to do it in a way that we think is appropriate. But as I said, I'll take whatever direction I'm given from the board.
Just a correction, sir. It's Matt Thal. He's from Boston. He works statewide. I just happen to know him from a project in there. So he's not from there. He's from Boston.
Thank you. So I certainly welcome comments from the board. I think my reaction is that this needs a little more work as far as, based on the discussion we had tonight. I think whatever is done has to be done properly with proper procurement procedures, even though it's only $2,500 we're talking about. But I think it's important that any input we get from someone is at arm's length. So I would ask the manager to, unless the board feels otherwise, to come back to us, probably not on the 3rd of October, because that's going to be a tremendously long meeting anyway, but soon thereafter, and see what else, kick the tires on this proposal a bit. Jim?
I think that's part of what we need to do. I would add to that, if it fit, that John set up a meeting with, whoever of Alyssa and Charlie and Tara can come to a meeting with, planning staff or whoever you think is appropriate, someone from the RHSO, and out of that, come back with a revised plan. It might be cut back. It might be, figure out how to jump more quickly to the economic analysis. I'm not sure exactly what the right process is, but I'm sure a really appropriate first step is to meet with the proponents and look over their spreadsheet and talk about, try to learn from what they've already done. Thanks.
And just to follow up on that, when you do come back with a proposal, if it's more than the 2,500, a funding source for whatever the difference is, I don't know if that money is available from ACHC or some other fund, but I think it's important to know where, although it's a fairly modest amount of money, I think it's important that we we know the full economic impact, since folks at town meeting thought they were buying a $2,500 thing, and now it's going to be a more expensive thing. David.
So, the first question I asked Kristen tonight is what information did we expect to get by surveying the public? And, basically she said clarity on what was meant by what the public passed at town meeting. But it's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing here, right? And maybe we should skip that and, do what these guys would like to do. But I also would say that it's not so simple, right? The economic analysis cannot be divorced by the structural assumptions here. And it's really complicated because I've tried to look into this a little bit myself. And I've not seen any example where it really works. And in addition to the structural assumptions that you make, we have to make assumptions or plans or something of how this relates to the existing entities we have in town, right? Both the ACHC and the Housing Authority, right? Especially, right? Well, those are the two biggest things. But, is this, what we would propose, and I don't think it can be divorced from, like I said, the economic analysis can't be divorced. So I think the economic analysis might have to make one of several assumptions or maybe have several different paths. And, I think it's complicated. So, but I could definitely live with not surveying the public first and going back to the public afterward, if we decide what we think we want to do, move forward, and then get public reaction.
Fran?
I think I'm going to hold my question for now.
Go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to respond to that. So the Lowell Housing Authority is one entity that does something similar. One of the proponents has a colleague who rehabs units. And I just want to remind the board that Kelly Cronin did say that the Acton Housing Authority could absorb these units if that was the model that we went with renting rather than selling them. And I had one more thought. Oh, surveying the public after. Whatever is created has to be voted on at town meeting, which is something that we let everybody at town meeting know. This is just for the economic feasibility, and the creation of the trust actually has to be approved by town meeting. We can't just have the select board create it.
Mr. Chair, there is one person online too.
Okay, we'll listen to one person online.
Remembered my question.
As far as putting would you put a bid out to several people? It wouldn't just be one person. Is that?
Well, yeah, certainly I think the work here tonight was to show us the scope that we developed based on the feedback that we saw in the town meeting warrant and everything we learned since. That scope could be used to solicit proposals from entities, certainly.
Thank you. I believe we have one person online wishing to make a comment.
I believe that can you hear me? It's Michaela Moran.
Yep, we can hear you.
Good. Sorry I couldn't be there in person tonight. I had a COVID exposure recently and want to make sure that everyone's safe. In looking at this, the proposal from the planning department, it seems that the scope really has expanded tremendously over what the group that put together the proposal and went before the town meeting envisioned. And I really would like to pull it back and get it under control. And that's really, we really do need to look at the economic feasibility. And David, you are correct that there is some structural assumptions that would have to be done, but I think that can be done in modeling. So I really do think we need to make sure that what we produce with this, with our $2,500 is what we actually wanted to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you.
So can I just summarize what the direction is? So are we agreeing that we'll meet with John, or are we?
I think it's inappropriate for you to summarize what the board is going to do.
I want you to summarize. If you would summarize what you've directed the town manager to do.
I've asked the town manager to come back sometime in October with a revised scope and his thoughts on how to proceed.
So just to request clarification, so Jim had suggested that he meet with us and go over the spreadsheet. Is that something that the board is wanting to happen? I want to understand what I just heard the board say.
I'm not going to second guess how the town manager interacts with his staff. So, John, however you feel it's appropriate to work with planning staff and other consultants, our HSO, I'll support you in that. Jim.
So along those lines, John, do you think it would be okay and appropriate for you guys to meet with, some group of Alyssa, Tara, and Charlie on this topic?
Yeah, that's a very good idea, yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, I think we can move on. Approved Memorandum of Understanding for Participation in MBTA Youth Pass Program. Mr. Manager.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce, or not introduce, but bring in the meeting Austin Saganowitz, Intergovernmental Affairs Director, to give the board an update on our transportation programs and some changes that are happening to make sure that the board is comfortable with the direction things are going.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Manager, members of the board. Good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight. So speaking on the first agenda item, very excited to actually present this agenda item, which is seeking authorization for the chair or their designee to execute the attached MOU with the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority to join the Youth Pass program. And just to briefly summarize this program, this offers reduced fares for Acton's youth population between ages 12 and 25 years old. And there are certain eligibility requirements and documentation that has to be provided to enroll in the program. For example, income verification, enrollment in an education or job training program. And once enrolled, residents will have to receive a Charlie card provided by the MBTA, which will automatically have those reduced rates, which are included in the memo in your packet. What's also great about this program is, other than staff time, there's no cost to the town for this program. So town staff will assist residents with the application process and will help enroll them into the program once eligibility is confirmed. I strongly believe that this will be an incredible asset for the youth population of the community, recognizing the significant barrier that the cost of transportation can be for those who seek to utilize these services, especially if they're trying to use these services to access opportunities such as employment or education. So just quickly on that program, happy to answer any questions.
I read through the packet. It seemed pretty self-explanatory and seemed like a pretty good deal for me. Imogen, I see you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I could not control my excitement. This was really great to read. I think that it'll be really helpful for young people. I know, speaking from like my experience, my family's experience, it's really helpful to have a youth pass. And so I think this will be great, especially for a lot of young people going into the city for things and things like that. One quick question: with getting a youth pass, do you have to show like an ID, or is there going to be any steps or will that be required in order to obtain a youth pass and to kind of use that on the train and things like that?
Yeah, so just from the eligibility and initial enrollment, there's some documentations or documents that you can provide. So recognizing not everyone may have a photo ID. If you can show a birth certificate, if you can show a school record, right? So we need to verify age and address. Right, so we just need to verify that you're between 12 and 25 and that you live in Acton. And then for those who are seeking to use it for additional programs, if you can provide, for example, if you're attending grad school in Boston, for example, if you can can provide like your transcript or something like that. Some sort of record that we know, because it's actually not Acton that is collecting these documents or storing these documents. I get these documents and I upload it into the portal, and the MBTA houses the rest of these documents. So we're really just administering the program and helping enroll, and then kind of the long-term, well, first of all, the fees are still collected by the MBTA. The Charlie card is managed by the MBTA. We just help provide them. So we're just kind of the frontline advocate and helping with the application process, and then the rest is managed through the T.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Excuse me, not talking for a while. On the Charlie card, have we reached out to the regional district to do a program? Because I think that this is something that would gain a lot of traction in the school system.
Great question. So the school districts are actually welcomed, and they're encouraged actually by the MBTA to also do their own program. So once we're in this program, they actually ask us to notify them, not only notify the school district to let them know that we have this program. That's part of our outreach that we need to do. We want to get as many people enrolled in this as possible. But the T also wants school districts on their own to be involved and have their own program, because on a day-to-day basis, they're connected a lot closer to the students than we are, right? So I will definitely reach out to my counterparts at the school districts, both school districts, and let them know that we have this program, and also encourage them to join it on their own as well.
Thank you. Comments, questions from the board? Unless I hear otherwise, I would be willing to go ahead and sign the, as chair. Jim.
I would happily move to approve the chair signing the MOU between the town of Acton and the MBTA to offer a youth pass program for reduced MBTA fares, unquote.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Further comment? Would the clerk call the roll?
Sure, Jen?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Fran?
Aye.
David? Aye.
I also say aye, that's unanimous.
Thank you. Discuss proposed changes to Crosstown Connect and transportation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So members of the board, I'll largely defer to my memo in the packet for this, but I will just start with a brief comment. So Crosstown Connect, as many of you know, is an initiative that was brought together years ago to bring both the business community and our municipalities to coordinate our transportation efforts. So the organization, again, as you know, is comprised of two sort of separate entities. One is a regional coordinated van dispatch with our neighboring communities, and the other is a transportation management association. So the pandemic, like every industry, has placed pressures on the sustainability of the program. But it's also emphasized some of the challenges that we face with the overall structure of the organization. So the recommendations that are proposed in the memo provided in your packet are rooted in the intent to ensure the long-term feasibility for the operations of the organization. And because the TMA is a membership-driven organization, it relies on membership dues to continue those operations. And for several reasons, some I just mentioned and some more, we have heard from our membership, so from several of our membership partners, of their intent to withdraw from the organization as they look to reevaluate a lot of their transportation needs. Some, for example, did not have an office space anymore, right? So they don't need our TMA service. However, in an effort to continue providing services to our existing members, Acton as the fiscal agent for this organization, we've been subsidizing the program. And at this point, we believe it's in the community's best interest to take a step back as the fiscal agent, and we really want to work with our partners to identify a model that works best for all stakeholders. Those are my brief comments. Happy to answer any questions you have on this as we sort of seek to move in a new future direction for Crosstown Connect, but protecting obviously our core services that are very important to the community.
Thank you. Comments from the board? David?
Thank you, Austin. I just, to make sure I understand, you're proposing separating the regional dispatch from the shared van service? I'm sorry, just to put that into my own words. And,
No.
no,
Sorry.
okay, I'm glad I asked then. Maybe you can then tell
Sure.
me.
Yeah, so just quickly, the Crosstown Connect, and I realize that when you go around town and you see our vans, you see the Crosstown Connect logo. I think they've done a great job with branding and putting it on everything. But Crosstown Connect, from an organization standpoint, is actually, as I just mentioned, it's a transportation management association, but it's also the regional shared dispatch. So that's where we have, the towns of Acton and Littleton, and for many years we had a few other municipalities that were joined where we share quite literally the regional dispatch for our COA vans. And a TMA is a membership organization, often made up of employers and developers and property managers that kind of work to coordinate their transportation needs, and usually it's within a well-defined geographic area. And where Crosstown Connect is different than most TMAs and most organizations, it's run by a municipality. We are the fiscal agent. Most TMAs are a nonprofit, so this definitely was an innovative solution, bringing the TMA model, but also the regional dispatch together under one umbrella. So what we're recommending is take a step back as fiscal agent, still provide and still be the lead community for our shared dispatch, but then work with our business partners and our municipality partners to see if we can find a better future for the TMA, possibly looking at that nonprofit model.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other comments from the board? Himija.
Thanks. So one quick question. If we are kind of taking a step back as the fiscal agent, would that mean that we would have more funding that we could put towards like other transportation needs?
It's great. That's a great question. So I think right now we still have member dues that are coming in from existing members. So, so there's funding that would go to, whoever's the new fiscal agent for the TMA. So that funding hypothetically would go to that new fiscal agent. And then we still are responsible. We pay for our proportionate cost of the dispatch program. So, and we'll still be providing that. I think what we're really looking for is to also look at, the organization altogether and see where we can, make efficiencies and provide the best quality service. And again, that's also having another deeper conversation with our municipal partners and see how we can, have a proportionate share of our costs in a municipal agreement that makes sense for all stakeholders.
Thank you. Okay. I don't believe, Mr. Manager, there's any action we need to take. This is just information.
Yeah, we just want to make sure that the board is aware. I mean, we provided some updates in the past where we extended the IMA, and that has now since expired. So we're technically operating without one. And what we're basically telling you is that we don't intend to ask you to renew it in the way it's been in the past. We are going to let it develop into a new program and just focus on sharing dispatch with Littleton and hopefully another town because that program is working really well. But we'd also like to cost share it a little bit more effectively for our taxpayers.
Thank you. Comment from the public?
Hi, Franny Osmond, 16 Half Moon Hill, and the chair of the Transportation Advisory Committee. Although we didn't talk about this particular proposal, we have talked about for many years, the Crosstown Connect program. Why don't I just speak for myself? I think it seems to me a good idea to separate the businesses from the municipalities. For many years, we would have board meetings of Crosstown Connect, and it always seemed like we were talking about one or the other, either. And it seemed like the company that was running it was, when they were working with the businesses, it really was not being done in concert with our program. They would separately work on our town programs. So that seems like it's reasonable to separate it. I don't know how not being the fiscal agent will affect things, because I've always liked that Acton had a very active role in talking with the company that was running it about what's going on. I just want to make sure that we don't lose agency as a town. But I just also wanted to note that it sort of has lost some of its oomph that we started with. As you mentioned, Austin, we started with Boxborough, Littleton, Maynard, and Acton all sharing dispatch, and we hoped to get into sharing vehicles too. Like, for example, Littleton on Fridays takes people long distance medical trips. And so the idea was that we could put Acton people on there. If they were going to Leahy or they were going to downtown Boston, we could arrange for somebody from Acton to take that vehicle. And I don't see a lot of that. I mean, I don't read the manifest, so I don't actually know, but I haven't been under the impression that that amount of sharing has been as successful as we hoped. And the fact that we right now only have 2 towns sharing, we still have the advantage, which is very big, that instead of just 2 hours of dispatch a day, we have 6 or 8 hours, I mean, which really makes a difference. So there's been a lot of advantages of sharing dispatch, sharing some vehicles, service. But I just want to make sure that we really focus on trying to get those things, getting more towns involved. I don't think Boxborough left for good reasons. I think they left for misunderstandings and they have very little support for their residents, transportation-wise. So I just hope that whatever we do, it doesn't diminish our efforts as a town to connect and work with all those other communities and to try to make our system more robust. So.
Thank you.
That's all. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Danny Factor, 11 Davis Road. I actually wasn't going to speak once I saw Franny come in, because my concern was just that we have advisory committees for a reason, and that this work that the town is doing is being done with the advice and hopefully consent of our Transportation Advisory Committee. So I think Franny was very articulate speaking for herself and made some very good points, but I was a little concerned that it sounded like, if I heard right, that the plan might not have been first presented to our town committee. So I really salute the work that Austin's been doing in transportation, but I would just, these are the people who we've nominated to be experts and to advise the town, and that we use our transportation committee, that the plan in the work that they're going to continue be formally presented to the Transportation Advisory Committee, and that there be discussion and time to comment from the people that we've delegated to do this kind of work. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, Town Hall and parking lot design.
Thank you. Given the hour, I want to encourage you to review the plan that I put before you. We could throw it up on the screen. Basically, we just signed a contract to do the town center construction, which is going to change the traffic circulation around the center. And as part of that, we're looking at some additional improvements, in particular to the parking lot. We want to make it safer for people to walk across and access the different parts of the facility. Some of the main features that we're trying to accomplish with this design are to have a net increase, or at least not a net loss in parking spaces. Obviously, a net increase would be better. We want to enhance the pedestrian and sort of the outdoor space in front of the library and make it safer. We've worked with the trustees to get feedback. Tonight, we're asking the select board for its feedback on the design that I think I circulated to the board within the last few weeks, and it's here before you tonight. It's hard to see, even on this big screen here. But the main feature that makes this interesting is if you've driven down the back of the way back, a lot of times you hit your bottom on the hill there. To fix that, we would make some major changes to the grade back there. And then we would make the circulation such that you can only come in one way near the voting box, the drop box for the ballot box right in front of Town Hall, and you can go out either of the two ways. And we're proposing to close the driveway along the library and make it a pedestrian plaza to make it a safer space for people that access the library, and also give an opportunity for people that want to hang out and read to do that right there. Those are the main things. And I look forward to any comments you want to provide now or later.
Thank you. Well, I'll start off because many of the problems that we're trying to address now started out on my watch. I think the comments that I made to the town manager a couple of weeks ago, I think the number one, no decrease in parking spaces. I know the parking lots are not heavily used now, but eventually folks are going to start coming back here. So I think it's important that we maintain the number of parking spaces we've got. Actually, the original design for the library parking lot had quite a large number of parking spaces in addition to what was actually built. And it was cut back to try to maintain green space. I think that's one thing. Number two, the second suggestion I have is to carefully review this to make sure the ease of plowing snow be kept foremost in everyone's mind, because we do have to deal with that from time to time. And it can be kind of a nightmare. These landscape architects love putting islands right in the most ridiculous places. So I think it's important to make sure that somebody from a practical point of view reviews this from the snow plowing aspect. The final point is I think this is a really good plan as far as making the pedestrian plaza in front of the library entrance. That has been an issue right from the beginning. Lots of near misses certainly initially with pedestrians almost getting picked off there. So I think this is a really nice plan. And finally, this has indeed been in the capital plan. I recommended it year after year after year to try to redo this and repave it. The town hall parking lot specifically was paved, I believe, in probably 1986. So, and you can tell it needs work. So I think this is a really good start. Questions or comments from members of the board? David.
Thank you. So in general, I like this. I think the grading is great. I like the inbound and outbound driveways behind Town Hall. I don't really understand why the lower parking lot would be exit only. Is there a particular reason for that? I mean, it seems to me to be you funnel all the but definitely funnels all the inbound traffic to have to go immediately behind Town Hall. And I don't think that's a good plan, frankly. I'd be much more comfortable if that other driveway was both in and out. The other thing I was wondering is, this is just a detail for things like the book drop-off at the library. people use that very frequently. I just think we should think about that. I mean, if we're expecting them to park further away and walk across the pedestrian plaza, that's okay if that's the intent. But I think we should think about where the book drop-off goes, and maybe even the ballot drop-off box as well. You know, I don't know whether, especially since that's the way it is right now, that's the only all the inbound traffic would have to come there. If someone just stops for a second to drop off their ballot, you know, the day before Election Day or something, I think the traffic wouldn't be good there. So, two things, I guess there's three total, but two things is, I would make that driveway further down Woodbury in and out. And I would just consider where the book drop-off and ballot drop-off boxes go. And finally, this is a small thing. The planter that's in the newly graded area, why is that there? You know, I mean, I don't really object to it, but it's just, that's the only one in the whole parking lot, and I was just wondering whether that served a specific purpose.
I think that may speak to the chair's commentary, but I don't know. I can find out for sure.
You mean it's supposed to be an impediment for plowing snow?
No, I think it's for design to make it look better, but we can look at that.
I don't have a lot of, Franny Osmond, I don't have a lot of comment on it, but I do totally agree with David. It's not going to decrease the overall traffic to limit where people can enter, but it just will make them, so I also don't understand the reason. I'd love to know the reason the planners
Thank you.
thought for that.
Fran.
I have just a quick question. I'm so confused by this, but that's beside the point. I don't know. I'm such a visual person. This is hard to see, like, what is existing and what is changing. So the number of spots are not changing. Is that right?
Well, as presented here in Concept 1, it's actually a net loss of 3, but again, this is something that we're not recommending, but that's just what the design team came up with, and we're giving back comments. One of them is we're not losing spaces, and then the rest of them are the other things that we're hearing from the board tonight. You know, for example, this is saying to close off the driveway to the Asa Parlin building, and that's not something that we want to do. So there's a lot of parts about this plan that are still in development, but I just wanted to give you, the main thing is the plaza in front of the library. If people didn't like that, then that's a big design feature to bring forward if people don't like it.
And you segued into my second question in that, is this taking into consideration the potential development of Asa Parlin, or?
Yes, so we've envisioned that space to be an outdoor gathering space, and the walkway shown where there's a raised crosswalk would lead right to the pathway that would be created to lead to what is now picnic tables on the grass, but we'd like to make it accessible to everybody.
Thanks.
I generally like the plan, but I want to make a bid for the trees. We already are missing so much shade and to keep the trees, but mostly I'd like very much for the select board to direct the town manager to get the town cars out of the parking lot that are sitting there gathering dust and taking up spaces. They can go behind the fire station. It's only a couple of blocks walk. Rarely does, employees have to walk, unless they got a handicap sticker. So I feel like driving past all those cars that aren't being used seems a poor use of precious parking spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. And surprisingly, I agree with you, Tara. Yeah. Imogen.
Thank you. One quick question. So with this new design, will there be any changes to the number of electric vehicle charging stations, or is that going to stay the same?
No, there wouldn't be any proposed changes to that at this time.
Jim?
Yeah, I think this plan generally makes sense. I agree with Fran in that I have some confusion about how we settle this without understanding more about the Asa Parlin House. But I can see that, you've just sort of reserved a bunch of space for things to happen there, and maybe that's just exactly all you need to do for now. When I think of parking, I think of a couple things these days. I think about advances that have been made in partially permeable surfaces. It used to be that it was really hard to maintain them, and that, that a conventional snowplow would block up all your partially permeable openings and turn it into a useless piece of expensive, hard-to-plow surface. But now, apparently, the technology has evolved to the point where you can actually, allow infiltration into the ground from the surface in a way that, prevents runoff. It might be something to look at. The other thing that I think about here, because I'm in the middle of working on it for where I live, is the economics of doing solar canopies over the parking. It gives you more chance to generate renewable energy, and it gives people the chance to park in a place that's, out of the snow and rain. And the only tricky thing is, making it financially feasible. So I think it's worth looking at. It may not make sense, but it's something I always think about when I see these big open parking lots.
Jim,
Mike Allen, Harris Street. I agree with David. The entrances, I think, should be flipped to the Gazinta and the Gazada, because of the fact that you'll have people coming in who are going to the library, and they shouldn't have to drive by Town Hall where you've got people walking in and out of Town Hall. If you make that the second curb cut, the entrance, then people who are going to the library will never go by the Town Hall, and other people curling around to either go to Town Hall or leave would be going out that exit, but you'd cut down dramatically the number of cars that would drive by Town Hall.
Thank you. I think, following up, Jim, on the question about the solar canopies, one impediment to that proposal might be the fact that most of this parking lot is within the historic district, and it's tough to make a historically accurate solar canopy. I'll defer to the liaison to the HDC on that.
What if it was wood framed?
Yeah. All right, Mr. Manager, have we beaten up on your plan enough yet?
Thank you. This is helpful. We have a lot of comments from everyone else too. This is obviously a widely used, so everybody has a lot of good ideas, and we really appreciate these, and we'll be back with another version, hopefully soon.
Thank you. Now we will morph into sewer commissioners. And let's do a presentation about financing. Mr. Barrett.
Good evening, Select Board. I have a presentation. I have hard copies of it. We can go old school if that wouldn't bother the board too much. Okay.
As long as you have a way of getting one to Imogen.
Is this the info guide, by the way, the presentation?
I didn't hear that.
Oh, just asking, so there's a DocuShare link to the informational guide. I don't know if that's the same as the presentation, but...
Yeah, it's similar. It was developed from the presentation, but it's a little bit different. Again, I apologize for not having the presentation ready electronically. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening to the board. I'm here to ask for a vote of the sewer commissioners for our FY23 billing. I'd like to review some components of our sewer operations for the board prior to any questions and a vote. First off, the town has been providing public sewer service for over 20 years. From a parcel count perspective, public sewer service is available in about 10% of the town. We have approximately 729 customers. That's further broken down to 662 residential and 67 commercial. The Acton-Boxborough Regional School District is one of our biggest O&M customers, as is the Plaza at Kelly's Corner. Our billing schematic uses winter water usage, which eliminates summer activities from the calculation. As the first chart in the presentation shows, our customers have been using less water as conservation efforts have been working. This is a good thing. The next chart depicts how our costs are stable for operation and maintenance of the treatment plant and collection system. In terms of rate recommendations, what we do is we take a look at flows, we take a look at costs, and we also take a look at reserves. And for the sewer commissioners, as you know, we have two types of reserves. We have operating reserves, which is our free cash, and we also have capital reserves, which is our stabilization fund. So when you kind of factor that all in, we are recommending a 5% rate hike. You know, and I can get you there through some of the math, but at the end of the day, the rate setting, it's not always quite a, you know, an accounting equation. Again, we try to look at the change in flows, the change in costs, and where our reserves are. And our reserves right now are approximately 1.1 million in operating reserves and about $1.3 million in stabilization/capital reserves. So at the end of the day, when finance looks at this in coordination with DPW and the manager's office, we're recommending a 5% rate hike. It's a little bit higher than the rate hike that we were looking at our sewer summit back in March of '22, which is about 2.5%. But town finance is recommending a 5% rate hike. If the commissioners approve this recommendation, the average single-family O&M bill will be approximately $85 per month. And again, I know it's been a long night for the board, but are there any questions before I could possibly get a board vote? Thank you.
Questions from members of the board? Jim.
I'll start with one. I might have others later, because I was looking at, you know, different documents before, so I'm a little confused. Because of the size of the operating reserve of 1.1 million, the consequences of setting a rate hike that's too low are that we would be eating into those reserves some, right?
Correct.
And is that reserve number an historically high or low number? Are you comfortable with that number? You know, how much? I mean, you know, it's the usual kind of, you know, calculations here of you know, we can save taxpayers some money this year if we have lower rate increases. But if the consequence is that we're going to have higher rate increases later because we're eating into too much of our reserves, then That's not worth it. So I'm wondering about that, the size of those reserves and how much being like a % off would eat into those reserves.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So in terms of our operating reserves, our sewer enterprise fund free cash, if you went back and looked at our certifications, they've been pretty stable the last few years, Jim, at around about $1 million, 1.1 million. So to me, when the DOR certifies essentially our public utility reserves, a kind of flattening of that chart to me says that overall operational revenues are handling operational costs. But, to your point, at the end of the day, the billing base is about maybe 900,000. So if you said, hey, the board doesn't want to do 5% because that's another 45,000 in revenue coming in, and we'd rather leave that with the O&M customers, that's the kind of leverage you're talking about. It's a $900,000 a year revenue stream. But to your other question, I am comfortable with our reserve position. Whether it's good or bad, I go far back to the days when this was a fledgling startup. We were setting O&M rates monthly, and we were scrapping to get by. I look at it now as a public utility. We provide extremely dependable service, but at the end of the day, I am comfortable with our reserve levels, Jim.
Thank you.
Anything more, Jim?
Not yet. Give me a minute.
Okay, thank you. Comment from other members of the board? Imogen.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. A really quick question. So in the packet that I have, I&I is mentioned, and I'm wondering with this increase in rates, would we be doing more I&I? Is this primarily just for the reserves? Just wanted to understand that better.
Yeah, that's a little outside of my technical area, but the budget does include funds for that. I think as the plant ages, it's important for these infiltration studies to look for leaks and things like that. But yes, we will continue to do that, and the rate hike will accommodate those costs.
Jim.
Okay, just to verify that I got this right. So all the expensive stuff that we've been talking about in terms of the replacement program and, bringing the facilities up to speed, that's all on the capital side and that stabilization account, not the O&M account. Is that right?
It is, Jim. It is.
Okay.
That's the long-term capital project.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, comment from the audience.
It's actually just a question. In the rate memo that Steve made, there was a reference to funding something for fluctuating rates for Powder Mill Plaza. And I think it would be unfortunate if the rest of residential users are paying for business expense. And so I'm hoping that there's a provision to ensure that the residents don't bear the brunt of corporate profits. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Melissa Nickel. I'm just going to echo what Tara just said because I am actually in the sewer district, whereas Tara is not. I was a little disturbed to see that part of this increase is due to variability with the Powder Mill Plaza project, because I don't really understand why that should impact all of the other users' rates. And I understand that Mr. Barrett is the financial, not the technical person here, but I'd love to get an answer to that. And there was one other thing. Excellent.
So in March, when we had the sewer summit, we were still anticipating that the powder mill project would come online in the next year or so. And adding that 200 plus units would increase the amount of users to the system, which would allow us to generate more revenue, which would allow us to not have to increase rates as much because more revenue is coming in. So with that not coming forward as quickly as we thought, we can't rely on that extra revenue to offset what we need to run the operations. So without having that scale of economy, we need to pay for the system with the existing users without the additional benefit.
All right, thank you. That was just not clear to me because it said Powder Mill Plaza, and I didn't connect it to Powder Mill Place, but that makes sense. I just wanted to take the opportunity to put a plug in once again for an audit, because it's been a little frustrating as sewer users to see that the components are not lasting as long as they were projected to last. You know, we're doing this $6 million rehab project at 20 years of age rather than 30 years of age. So I'd really love to see someone come in and, you know, just have an overview of the operation and maintenance, just to make sure that everything is functioning. I'm sure they've come a long way since they were a fledgling operation 20 years ago, but just for, you know, good governance, transparency, and the faith of all of the sewer users, that would be much appreciated. Thanks.
Thank you. David.
Thank you, Steve. Can you tell me how much of the operating budget is debt service?
Yeah, David, it's probably about 900,000, 950 a year.
Oh, so that's not in these graphs that are on
Yeah, it gets a little in the weeds, but
the second page.
the debt service for the sewer project is paid by the betterments that we issued. So the O&M cost handle the non-capital, the non-debt cost.
Got it. So though going forward, the rehabilitation project debt service will be paid for out of the operating budget?
It will. It'll be added in similar to the MWPAT debt service that's in there now.
Thank you.
All right. I would entertain a motion. David.
I move to approve the 5% sewer sewer use rate increase.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Is that of sufficient detail for a decision, Mr. Manager?
Did you say O&M rate? I think if it says
sure
O&M,
did, yes.
O&M rate covers us, yes.
Jim.
Yeah, I still don't understand why, you know, why 5 rather than 4 or some other number. You know, so I have a hard time feeling like I'm making an informed, careful decision in the interests of the town of Acton. So I may either just abstain or vote no, but I don't quite get it, that's all.
Mr. Chair, can I try to address
Yes,
that?
David.
So the costs are actually more than 5%, right? So you probably wouldn't go 4, right? And the reason I think for choosing 5 rather than 6 or something like that is just to flatten them a little bit, right? They probably won't be so high every year, right? And so you were right before. We may eat very slightly into the reserves because the increase is a little bit less than the cost, but it's not huge. I mean, we could do 6% or something, you know, but you know, I think it makes sense to flatten them for rate users so that you don't see a big jump in 1 year.
So in our latest piece, do we have that proposed? Okay, the FY23 operating budget is up 6.8% from FY22.
Yes, and can I make one other point here,
Yeah,
which is
please.
listed on, which is not necessarily obvious, on 2 pages after that, I don't think these pages are numbered, where it says budget up and flows down.
Yeah.
So flows down has 2 problems. One is, since ratepayers pay by their water usage, flows down because people get more efficient toilets and things like that. That's great. It means that we have decreased revenue there, though, because we charge by the water use. However, what the plant has to process has to do with the organics in the water, no matter how much water is there, right? And so the cost in the processing of the plant does not go down with the decreased flow. It's just that our money goes down. So assuming that, someone doesn't unhook from the system, right, which I don't think we've had that. So the flows down is because people are being more efficient, which is, again, great. We just have to recognize that is, that decreases revenue.
But, I'm sorry, can I follow up? But David, if you're saying the budget has to go up by 6.8% and there's a drop of 2.5% in flows, why aren't we looking at an increase of 9.3, adding up 2.5 and 6.8?
So the decrease of 2.5% doesn't translate directly into an increase in cost. It just says the flow goes down, right?
Okay.
Right. It required more complicated analysis to figure out what the gap was there. But you're right on the other side, that we could have a motion to raise the rates by 6.8%, if that's what we wanted, right? But I think there's my opinion is that I think there's an advantage to flattening those for users.
So by flattening, do you mean that we're sort of going to try to go for 5% a year for a while?
We have to see what happens next year. I mean, one of the huge things in anticipation, right, is what happens with Powder Mill Place, right? Because that, unlike the existing sewer district, an apartment building, if one gets built there, along the lines of what was originally proposed, those apartments probably would be sold in 6 months, right? And so the new users would come on really quickly and be ratepayers. It's not like the betterments when people over 20 years hook up, when there's septic systems fail or whenever they want, So if something like that is coming up soon, that changes the financial projection such that we might not need a big increase, right? We might not. But I think, to me, it makes sense to flatten it this year and then take a look again next year. And if Steve's comfortable with the reserves, if he was saying, well, that, not enough, if something bad happens, I would be in favor of a bigger increase. But since he's comfortable, I think that makes sense.
All right, I think we've got a motion and a second. So would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Jim?
I'll abstain.
Okay, thanks. Dean?
Aye.
Thanks, Fran.
Aye.
Thank you, David.
Aye.
Thanks. I also say aye. That's 4 ayes, 1 abstain. So it passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Consent agenda. Item 13, approve Hawk Ridge Memorandum of Understanding. Item 14, approve meeting minutes August 22nd and September 7th, 2022. Approve executive session minutes August 22nd, 2022. Number 16, approve letter of support from McManus Manor funding by the Development of Housing and Community Development. Number 17, approve a one-day alcoholic beverage license, Neshoba Valley Neighbors Club, Village of Nagog Woods Clubhouse, October 29th, 2022. Number 18, approve a one-day alcoholic beverage license, Emily Robbins, Narrow Park Picnic Pavilion, September 30th, 2022. Number 19, approve a one-day alcoholic beverage license, Solar on Earth, Narrow Park, September 15th, 2022. Number 20, committee appointments. Okay. We held.
Before you read it, the whole thing.
Okay. Number 21, committee appointment. Michaela Moran, Associate to Full Member, Planning Board, to fill unexpired term of Derek Chin till June 30th, 2024. Number 22, approve gifts to support production costs of the Kelly's Corner Block Party. Just read through the names of the donors. Acton Conservation Trust, Acton Lions Club, Barrett Sotheby's International Realty, Ben Jurong Restaurant, Danny's Place, Enterprise Bank, Hanson's Auto Body, Middlesex West Chamber of Commerce, Pedal Power Bike and Ski, Penguin Coating, Sal's Auto and Truck Repair, Santa Fe Burrito Grill, Sorrento's Pizza, Sutherland Realty, TD Bank Acton, The Bee's Knees, Village Pediatric Dental, and Visiting Angels. I'll accept a motion to approve consent items 13 through 19 and 21 and 22 inclusive.
So moved.
Second.
Moved, seconded. Let's take a vote on that. Would the clerk please call a roll?
Yes, David.
Aye.
Awesome, Fran.
Aye.
Thanks, Dean.
Aye.
Thanks, Jim.
Aye.
Thanks, I also say aye, that's unanimous.
Thank you. Item 20.
So I wanted to remove Roxy Weber from the appointments for tonight, if we can do that. The applicant wasn't vetted through the VCC, so we're going to hold off on that applicant.
Okay, thank you. So, would be number 20, committee appointments. Leo Fochman, Danny Factor, Madeline Cruz, Boris Klevanov, at-large members, Human Services Committee, terms to expire June 30th, 2025.
Move to approve item 20.
Moved and seconded. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Jim?
Aye.
Thanks, Dean.
Aye.
Thanks, Fran.
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Thank you, and I also say aye.
Thank you. I will.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I noticed I just said move to approve item 20. Should I have said move to approve item 20 as amended?
You did. Thank you. I will entertain one more motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved, seconded, not debatable. Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Jim.
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Fran?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
I also say aye, that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you for your attention and hard work.